First up on the agenda tonight is a recap on March 26th, Saturday. We had an executive session where we had a 4-hour mediation session with the police department union and came to a new contract that will be effective actually July 1st of last year, the 17th, and run through the 30th of June of 2020. 2020, thank you. Details of the finalized contract will be out shortly. I know some has already been in the paper, but the rest of the details will be out shortly. The vote was 6-0 for the ratification of the new contract. Ms. Pedro was unfortunately not able to be there because she had a family obligation. We have our consent agenda. We have bills to pay from 3/23/18 and 3/30/18. Any questions on the bills? It's just to remove, receive and place on file. Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And one recusal. So the motion is 6-0 with one recusal for Mr. Kessel. Next up, we are sitting as the Board of Licensed Commissioners. We have a special event with a fee waiver request for the Portsmouth Lions Club doing the Touch-A-Truck, annual Touch-A-Truck event, May 5th at the Glen Park.
Move to approve with a fee waiver request.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next, we have a peddler's license for Rugby Imports Limited at 885 Warren Avenue, East Providence, for the Beast of East Rugby Tournament for both April 14th and 15th.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. A motion
to adjourn.
Second.
From the Board of Licensed Commissioners.
Board of Licensed and Commissioners.
If you want to adjourn the whole meeting yet.
Not
All
yet.
those in favor?
I would.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. We have meeting minutes from 3/12/18, both the regular meeting and the executive. We have the regular meeting on the 26th and the executive from the 31st. So why don't we take these in order here? We'll do the executive and the regular minutes from 3/12/18.
Motion to approve.
Any questions on the minutes? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That's okay. He can approve.
I was
minutes.
missing 15 minutes, correct?
Yeah, so that's okay. Next, we have the meeting minutes for 3/26/18, just a regular meeting.
Motion to approve.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. And then the executive from 3/31/18.
Motion to approve. Second.
All those in favor? Aye. And any opposed?
I didn't get the minutes. The exec.
You can give, so she could still have it, yeah. Okay, so the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we have one abstention, which would be Ms. Pedro. So 6-0 and 1 on that one. We have tax vouchers of 2018-0409-1 to 2018-0409-5.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Rayner, Town Administrator's report.
Good evening, Mr. President, Council, ladies and gentlemen. First, quick update on the Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan. The update to Portsmouth's Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan has been ongoing since the Council approved the VHB contract where they would assist in the formulation of our new plan. As a reminder, we must have an updated FEMA-approved natural hazard mitigation plan to qualify for post-disaster relief funds. Work so far has focused on identification of critical infrastructure, community assets, and vulnerable populations, and creation of a list of actions needed to lessen the impact of a natural disaster. The third of 5 planned meetings with VHB will be held tomorrow, April 10th, and we are still on track to provide the public an opportunity to review and provide comment on a draft hazard mitigation plan in June of this year. With respect to the search for a new finance director, since my last report, we have conducted second interviews with 3 candidates, and we will interview 3 more candidates this week. Last Monday, Senator Whitehouse conducted a press conference at the Thrive Coffee House in Island Park to highlight the newly funded National Oceans and Coastal Security Fund. This fund was established to help coastal businesses address issues surrounding climate change. And in the omnibus spending bill, which was signed into law in late March, Congress approved $30 million for this security fund, which will be awarded through a nationwide competitive grant process. Our town planner was present at the conference and spoke briefly about the potential impact of changing climate conditions to Portsmouth. The latest Navy community leadership meeting was held aboard the Naval Station on March 29th, and at that meeting, it was discussed that when the fence goes back up along the south side of Tank Farm 4, this is that area in Redwood Farm, or Redwood Neighborhood District, it will be planted on the property line, not the 50-foot setback, which is where the old fence used to be. So it will be on the property line, and all the abutters have been notified. Gary provided the group an update with respect to Tank Farms 1 and 2, and the commanding officer discussed his plan to repair the winter damage to Burma Road and the need for further study on the condition of sewer and water infrastructure on that corridor. He also encouraged the town of Portsmouth to work with the Navy on developing on what he referred to as creative solutions on the future ownership of Stringham Road. It was also reported that the sampling for the chemical contamination at the backyard property will begin this month. And it was announced that the EPA will give a technical presentation on their assessment on polyfluoroalcohol contamination in Tank Farms 1 and 2 and at the backyard property at the next RAB meeting, RAB meeting. As required by Rhode Island State Department of Health, we will conduct an exercise of our town medical emergency distribution system, MEDS, point of dispensing pods, MEDS pod, on Thursday, April 19th at the Portsmouth High School. We will exercise the setup of the dispensing operation for a town medical emergency from 9 a.m. to noon on that day. The MEDS pod can quickly establish a dispensing operation to distribute preventative medications to the entire affected population in the unlikely event of a medical pandemic or attack. The town has special procedures and pre-positioned equipment for such an eventuality. The exercise will coincide with the school spring break so as not to disrupt any school classes. Any citizens who are interested in observing the medical distribution setup are invited to visit the high school from 11 a.m. to 12 noon, and there was a press release issued to announce that. And a reminder, this Thursday, as directed by the council, I coordinated a meeting between Green Energy Development and residents who have expressed concern over the operation of the wind turbine. The meeting will be here in council chambers, again, this upcoming Thursday, and it will start at 6 p.m. With respect to the police station construction project, milestones completed since my last report. The foundation walls are complete. Underground utilities within the building are complete. The slab at-grade slab placement has been finished, and erection of the steel structure has begun. Total construction billings to this date are just a little over $1.4 million, and the town is withholding 5% retainage per the contract documents. We have received lien waivers for payments made to date, and certified payroll affidavits are current. The architect has issued two change orders to date totaling $6,285, and we are quantifying and preparing to issue additional change orders throughout the next month to address unsuitable soils and ledge encountered during the excavation of the site. The critical path schedule has been updated and still confirms substantial completion of the new building in late October with demolition of the existing building to follow immediately. As noted, the contractor has agreed to a zero cost change order in acknowledgement of the time extension due to winter weather and unsuitable soil conditions. So it'll be finished in October by September, but there will be no charges. And the project is approximately 15% complete. A couple additional notes that I just found out about. McGuire Equipment will begin installation of the new compactor at the transfer station next Monday on April 16th. On that day, they will remove the old compactor, and on Tuesday and Wednesday of that week, they will install the new unit. DPW is working closely with McGuire Equipment, our electrical contractor, and Venagro to ensure that the operation proceeds as quickly and smoothly as possible with the least amount of disruption to people dispensing of their trash. And additionally, providing that the contractor can obtain stock material from a supplier, which he expects to be the case, repairs to the dog park should be completed this week. And then lastly, I sadly report the passing of a dedicated public servant and a true friend to Portsmouth. Mr. George Medeiros, our previous building official who served in that capacity for over 30 years, passed away peacefully on Saturday, March 31st, after fighting a courageous battle with cancer. He was a friend and mentor to many and will be sorely missed by all who knew and worked with him. And that concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. With regards to the dump, so while they're repairing the one pit, recycling will go outside again?
Yeah, that's the assumption right now. We're working with Venagro, but the recycling will go outside, and then the second pit will be used for trash.
Okay. Anybody else have questions for Mr. Mayor? Mr. Kessler?
Tank farm forward, only skirts, Redwood Farms? I was down in the Overlook, and there's an awful lot of digging. Like a fence is gonna go there where the condos are, the Almeida Apartments.
Yep. I can't think of the geography in my mind right now, but the issue that I was addressing there is over the years, people have maintained the property up to the fence line, which was set 50 feet in from the Navy property. The Navy is exercising ownership of that 50 feet, and they're putting the new fence on the property line, so there's a lot of homeowners that are
Thinking they lost it.
thinking they lost land, but they didn't lose any land.
Okay. Because I saw, like I said, I saw an awful lot of digging.
Yeah.
I happened to be down in the Overlook at Almeida. My next question was, if I might have another minute.
Well, can I skip over to you and go to Ms. Badro?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I just wanted you to repeat what you said about the dog park.
They're providing that the contractor can get the stock material that he needs this week, and he thinks he can. The dog park will be fully repaired this week. The small dog park area has been open, so this really applies to the large dog park area, and we think that'll be done by the end of the week.
Okay.
Yes, on the finance directors, you brought in 3 finalists, and now you're looking at finalists 4 through 6?
We brought in 3 finalists, and none of them were past the board, so we will bring in 3 more this week.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, sir. On to resignations and appointments. We have a resignation from the Portsmouth Housing Authority of Mr. Jones.
Motion to receive with regrets.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. We have a new appointment for the Design Review Committee, Mr. Brendan Abbott.
Motion to approve.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. And a reappointment to the Glen Manor House Authority of Ms. Duvall.
Motion to approve Claudia Duval as the
Second.
Glen Manor Housing Authority.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. On to old business number 1, we have a request for removal of Mr. Ingram from the EDC. We have gone through this a couple of times. Apparently, he has not lived up to his expectations of being at the meeting, so they have requested the removal again, and I don't see Mr. Ingram here, and Mr. McMahon poked his head in and left. So, we have
Motion to receive with regrets.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Old business number 2, proposed addition to the Portsmouth Town.
Mr. President, excuse me. Is it possible to make a motion to put new business up before we go into the public hearing?
Sure.
Maybe some people that are waiting here for that
Not
discussion.
sure there are, but if there, absolutely, we can do that.
I'll
Is there a
second
second
that.
that? Fantastic. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. New business number 1 is the annual post-prom party that is held traditionally, I'm not sure if it is this year or not, but traditionally it's held at the Elks Club. For the past 5 or 6 years or so, the town has donated $1,000 to help keep our students safe after they have their senior prom. Do I have a motion to approve the $1,000?
Motion to approve?
Second.
And this money comes out of the town council's contingency fund. Next year, it'll actually be a line item in the budget, I believe.
I think I saw it as one.
Yes. So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Mr. Gleason, for that. Now we'll go back to old business number 2. We'll be having a public hearing for the change of the town code of ordinances for short-term rentals for residential dwellings. Anybody who is interested in coming up, because this is a public hearing and we will open it, we'll have as much public discussion as you would like. When you do come up, if you could please speak clearly into the microphone and also state your name and your address for the record, so that the clerk can write it down and also that we can hear you well. This item started about, 12 months ago here. It's been going on in other towns and been a little bit more publicized, specifically in Newport. Middletown also had their runaround and have created an ordinance and also changed it a little bit as well. We need to be careful to make sure that we are maintaining everybody's rights, both the property owners who are listing these and also the neighbors who live next door. If you have specific stories, if you could keep them short. I think we have a lot of people who want to talk tonight. If we can work it out and have everybody talk about 2 minutes, I don't mind if people come back up afterwards, but if we want to get everybody in to talk, if we can handle comments for 2 minutes, and then we'll see how the night progresses if people want to come back up. That way we're not all here till midnight, if that seems fair. We will get started. Mr. Rayner. Hang on. Mr. Kessin, your comment?
I have a question, Mr. President.
Sure.
Are we going to approve an ordinance on the fly tonight, or are we in the business of collecting comments from everybody and then at some point later deciding what's going to get put into the ordinance?
Well, there's a draft ordinance in front of us. Unless we make,
I'm assuming there's going to be changes.
unless there are huge substantial changes that are material in nature,
Okay.
we can approve it tonight. But if we decide to rewrite the entire ordinance, then I would say we go back out and advertise it again for people who may not have made it tonight. But if we're just talking about minor changes, it's been advertised essentially twice now. And we can make changes as we go. Mr. Rayner?
Yes, Mr. President, what you have before you is the draft or proposed ordinance regarding short-term rentals. This is a project that was completed by an ad hoc working group following the presentation of a white paper over a month and a half ago. We were directed to form this working group and see if we could develop a proposed ordinance regarding short-term rentals. This is what will be discussed tonight. I really don't have anything further to add.
Okay.
One question, Mr.
Kessin?
Rayner.
Absolutely.
Mr. Rayner, it changed earlier on from 6 years to 12 years, or 12 years to 6 years defining a child. Can you tell me which ordinance is the one before us? Because
6
I didn't
years.
get one in my packet, the current copy, so...
The current one listed on the website and in the paper was 6 years.
So it's 6 years. That's the one we have. Thank you very much.
That's currently what's advertised, yes.
That's what I wanted to make sure. I have that current one with me.
Any other comments or quick questions from the council? If not, we will open up the floor. I know you're not all shy, so anybody who wants to get up first. Otherwise, this is going to be a really short hearing. Mr. Moore.
What I wanted to say was there were...
Mr. Moore, if you could just pull the microphone over, please, thank you.
I
And
apologize.
again,
James Moore.
And your
My
address.
residence is 217 Indian Avenue.
Thank you,
Newport.
sir.
And I was one of the members of the public that was asked to participate in the working study group. And as a result of that, we ended up with a document of which I think we're all very proud, with perhaps the exception of one critical point, which Mr. Rayner did highlight. And so on behalf of the group of citizens who had a different perspective on that, I'd like Mr. McCulloch to present what we consider to be an alternative paragraph 8A for the council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
My name is John McCulloch, 355 Indian Avenue, Portsmouth. I'm speaking on behalf of those members of the short-term rentals working group appointed by the town council in February. We wish to thank Mr. Rayner and the members of the administration and for his leadership of the working group and overseeing the creation of a draft short-term rental ordinance. The meetings of the working group were focused and constructive and included council-appointed citizens, town administrative and professional staff, and representatives of the short-term rentals industry. The result is a draft ordinance that should fairly balance legitimate needs of both Portsmouth homeowners and the rapidly growing short-term rental community operating in town. We wish to submit a revision to paragraph 8A of the draft, which has the unanimous support of the 4 public members of the working group. The tight timeline to present a working draft to the council didn't allow a full discussion of the proposed revision. On presenting the draft to the council, Mr. Rayner highlighted that there had not been a consensus on the language in paragraph 8A, and we were encouraged to bring revision forward for discussion at tonight's meeting. We understand that Mr. Rayner has distributed the proposed revision to council members, and I have 25 copies with me for those present who wish to read it. The original language of paragraph 8A stated clearly in its first sentence that I quote, "The maximum occupancy for the dwelling unit shall be 2 persons per bedroom," end quote. However, the last sentence of the draft paragraph contradicts this by stating, "Not more than 2 persons per bedroom plus 2 additional persons may be present in any short-term rental between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. Paragraph 8 is the key to the ordinance. It is imperative that it be clear and enforceable. We submit that the draft should clearly state the limit of 2 persons per bedroom and that the addition of the contradictory phrase 2 additional persons will cause unnecessary confusion and invite creative interpretation, which might make enforcement more difficult. The proposed revision takes care of this. In his submission, Mr. Rayner stated the intent of the 2 additional persons was to allow for guests. This is confusing, at least to me, as the entire purpose of paragraph 8A is to codify the allowed number of guests or persons as defined in the paragraph. Unless the intent is to allow more than 2 persons per bedroom, the phrase 2 additional guests is not needed. An argument was made that the phrase 2 additional guests was inserted to allow a host to offer space for guests who have been in the house, say for a party, and are overserved and should not drive. Again, the contradictory language is not necessary. It is very hard to believe that Portsmouth authorities would cite a host who is otherwise in full compliance of the ordinance for being a responsible citizen. Arguably, a better way to deal with this would be through another disruptive technology we're all dealing with, and that's Uber, or maybe the old-fashioned taxi cab. The proposed revision eliminates the language 2 additional guests, correcting the conflicting language in the first and last sentences of draft 8 alpha. The revision also repositions the draft's definition of occupancy and overnight limits for clarity. As I said, the proposed revision has the unanimous approval of the working group members appointed by the council in February, and we strongly encourage the council to adopt the revision, which will provide a clear, unambiguous occupancy limit, improving enforcement. Again, we wish to thank the town administration for creating a draft ordinance which, with the suggested revision, will provide a common sense and workable framework for all the stakeholders in this matter. Thanks also to the town council for the time taken on this matter, which is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. If you could just leave them up there, if people want to come up and grab them, they can. That'd be great. Thank you.
Having introduced myself once, I won't do it again. The state of Rhode Island sees short-term rentals as a tremendous business opportunity. They take in millions of dollars of taxes. They've stated that towns cannot prohibit rentals, but they can regulate them. In fact, our fair share of that tax income, if we have between 100 and 150 houses, ought to be well in excess of $150,000 a year. I'm not sure whether that's been included in the budget or not, Mr. Rayner.
It's a pass-through tax that only if it gets paid to the state, it comes back to us. So if they're not currently being, if a short-term rental is rented through Airbnb or VBRO, then they're assessed the tax. But if
Okay.
you rent to me and you don't go through
Right.
a site that collects the tax and you choose not to forward the tax, then that is not collected.
So, I mean, we ran some numbers. What we're getting right now, I mean, this is a portion of the tax that is given back to the town, so this isn't the whole amount. But in fiscal year 17, that 1% redemption back to the locality from hosting platforms and hotel resellers, like Trivago or so on and so forth, Hotels.com, Airbnb, that was about $5,400. And then other short-term rentals that did not go through those, but obviously it's self-reported in some way, either through realtors or homeowners, that was another $5,100. So it was, so attributed to short-term rentals, the tax revenue was about $10,500. And that is part of the budget, i.e., that is what we project. So enacting the ordinance doesn't create more revenue via the tax stream unless more people are being reported
Right.
and are registering.
So the key is identification and registration of these property owners. The key issue, I think, in the ordinance, as Mr. McCulloch addressed, is addressing over-occupancy relative to individual homes and the neighborhoods. And I actually should say houses, because these are not homes, they're rental units. The ordinance does not in any way prohibit Airbnb business. In Portsmouth, our famous peace and quiet is a function very heavily of our population density. With over 6,800 occupied homes, there's an average of 2.6 persons per home living here full-time. We're no longer living in the era of large families. However, for Airbnb-type properties, the average density is 2.3 persons per bedroom, or about 7 in a 3-bedroom and 8 to 10 in a 4-bedroom, more than twice the density of the other homes in their neighborhood. This intense occupancy level directly impacts safety through parking, health through septic, and the ability to peacefully enjoy one's homes to the sheer numbers. All ordinance should be clear and to both the regulated individuals whose business this ordinance is designed to preserve, and let me say that, designed to preserve the Airbnb business if properly managed, and to the citizens for whom it was drafted to protect. It must be enforceable in a fair manner. However, when I spoke recently to several owners about the 2 additional persons language, they actually all laughed. They said, really? What this becomes immediately in a 3-person bedroom home, 6 people for renters and 2 designated additional persons. In fact, additional persons should be called super persons, since they're not required to register as renters, don't show up, therefore, when enforcing the key considerations of parking and septic. It's no wonder that Middletown dropped guest language from their document. Another much discussed issue, at least under people that have contacted me in the last few weeks, has been the amount of the licensing fee. For the 34 homes that I was able to analyze in detail, ranging from 2 to 6 bedrooms in different parts of the town, the nightly average rental for the average size, which is about 3.8 bedrooms, is around $140 per night, per bedroom. In Island Park and Common Fence Point, the typical 3-bedroom rents between $300 to $500 a night. This income level relates directly to the proposed annual licensing fee of $100 per bedroom, i.e. less than a single night's rental income for this type of rental property. In return, Instead of operating in the legal shadows, the business owner gets a recognized licensed business status in a single-family residential neighborhood. The town, properly managed, will receive income more than sufficient to cover the cost of the licensing process and enforcement. The critical question is enforcement. It's easy to write an ordinance. It's hard to staff the enforcing. In the past, enforcing the zoning ordinance of this town has been hard because there have been not relevant sections to identify the obligations of the owners clearly, nor the fines for non-compliance. This ordinance directly addresses those shortcomings. The key to achieving compliance by investors in these properties in a cost-effective manner will be the use of compliance software platforms, such as that provided by Host Compliance, but there are others. Using a Host Compliance website, it appears that the cost of the services to include identifying short-term rental houses on a weekly basis, notifying the owners of those houses of the need to register, allowing citizens to monitor compliance with the ability to provide real-time data to both owners, and this is critical, to owners and the town of non-compliance. The creation and maintenance of this real-time database of responsible owners and their repeat violators is about $12,000 a year. It has been suggested to me several times that this ordinance and the use of compliance software will pit neighbor against neighbor. First of all, for Airbnb properties, it isn't neighbor against neighbor. It's neighbor against property investor who does not live in the property and rents it out to other people on a year-round basis. However, and this ordinance excludes the classic B&B with the owners and residents. However, the potential for conflict between the investor owners and their neighbors is only going to become more intense if we do nothing. The train is moving down the tracks. The number of short-term rentals is growing at about 30% annually in this town. It's doing that nationally. It went from 1 million in 2011 to over 6 million today in the United States. Using technology, the neighbors can easily and constructively inform both owners and managers of properties who the violators are, and do so anonymously if necessary. When they do so, the city will have the data it needs to act, which has not been the case in the past. In the real world, neighbors of these business ventures are not going to be up at midnight or 7 in the morning identifying violators with their cell phones unless the violation of the ordinance has been extensive and regular. When I spoke to owners, in fact, they responded positively to the possibility that their citizen neighbors would have the ability to notify them or their property managers in real time by email and emailed photographs of any violation by their renters. Because the biggest single problem they said they have is, in fact, over-occupancy, where they've rented a property to 6 people or 8 people, and 10, 12, 14 show up and they're not aware of it until well after it's happened. And the owner has had no ability to notify either them or the city of these kinds of events. And finally, and I did speak to other members of our citizen group about this, owners have commented to me that 80% or more of their summer weekends are already fully booked. This town is nearly sold out for short-term rentals for the summer. And they suggested that the ordinance, if approved, contain a grace period such that it not impact this summer's rental business because they have reasonably contracted legal obligations. As a group, we understand this concern, and we're not opposed to a grace period as long as the ordinance would be fully implemented by the end of this year to take effect in 2019. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, I'm Bob Brooks. I live in Portsmouth, and I have a rental property in the Island Park area. We tried selling this house several years ago. When the market was down, we had problems, so we started doing short-term rentals.
Can you just give your address for the record, please?
Where I live,
Yes.
140 Maley Terrace.
Thank you, sir.
I also have a business in Portsmouth as well. I understand the need for registering these houses for safety purposes. I also think that there's a serious issue with the 9-month rentals in the town of Portsmouth. I see it is renting to college students I don't understand why they would not have to need to register, but I would have to register. I also don't understand why it'd be $100 per bedroom. I have a 4-bedroom house, but I would say the registration fee should be the same for any property. We pay over $10,000 a year in property taxes on this house. We collected over $4,000 last year in state and local hotel tax, I guess it would be called, which we collected and paid. This property doesn't really make a profit. I think Portsmouth probably makes more money on it than I do. Also, my typical client is usually somebody in their 60s who has a couple of adult children and maybe a couple grandchildren. So there's 3 generations of people staying at the house. This will be my 4th year. We haven't had any issues with any police calls or anything like that. The people keep the house clean. It's neat. We maintain the property. We keep the landscaping clean. We keep the inside of the house clean. So I don't really see it being too much of an issue, but I do have an issue with some of these 9-month rentals. I think they should be registered. I think that's a serious problem for the town. So that's just my feeling on it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Fitzmaurice.
Thank you, Mr. President. Larry Fitzmaurice, 50 Kristen Court. I have copies of a letter for the council and for staff. I can either hand it out or I can hand it to the
Pass it
clerk.
around, it'll work. Thank you.
The purpose of the letter is to detail my remarks, because we're going to make recommendations to changing the ordinance. And I don't think there's anything real great in this, but there is one major recommendation. But in any case, the council will have the detailed knowledge of what it is I'm speaking about. Let me say in general that this has been a good approach. The council designated to the town administrator to administer and lead the short-term rental team, and it produced what we consider to be a credible, good draft ordinance. And I want to thank everyone on that team, especially the town administrator. It was a good effort. And so we have some recommendations, but I want to start by saying that. In general, looking at the problem from the wider aspect, this town has is in a more or less of a resort area, although most of us don't think it that way. But we're turning into a resort area. We now have people who come here and live here in summer homes in the newer, higher rent districts. But the rest of us have never considered that, and it's a growing thing. The new technology that provides the opportunity to rent via the internet is enabling lots of people to come here who wouldn't have otherwise been aware of what we are. So we're facing a technology that is going to grow this phenomenon rather quickly in the town. Also, the existing ordinance on the books prohibits renting to more than 4 people in residential dwellings. So this ordinance will actually expand the legal opportunities for homeowners, but it will also regulate what we consider to be a growing problem. You've heard from others, so I'll just summarize on the hotel end. We have some large operations that are operated as businesses within our residential areas. That was never the intent of the zoning code for residences in this town or anywhere else, probably, that one would be allowed to run a business in a residential area. We're to preserve the peace and quiet and the intent of the residential zoning code. It is our judgment in the PCC, the Portsmouth Concerned Citizens, that we're going to have some regulation here. And there's 2 areas. One is the people come and visit overnight. Then the other one is the people who rent longer term and are here because they're going to college in the area or some such thing as well. So it's the second one which we don't think this ordinance covers adequately. We believe, and we've heard, and some of our members have told us, that Bristol and Middletown, and we know Middletown and Newport are cracking down on this trade, this phenomenon. Not that all of the people that are involved in it are a problem, because they're not. And we certainly have a number of members of the Portsmouth Concerned Citizens that do this. And I've interviewed most of them. So, but this ordinance is written, does not cover what we would refer to, for lack of a better term, party houses. The groups that are renting these things in large numbers, who are there for longer than 31 days, which is a specification for short term in the ordinance, and who are disrupting their communities in many different ways. Not all of those people, probably not even the majority of them, do that, but some do, and that's the issue, I think. There's crowded streets, certainly in Island Park, but elsewhere, because of the extended parking that is necessary to support these. We think the ordinance does a good job in dealing with that, but we believe that this ordinance needs to be extended from 31 days as a definition for short term to 9 months in order to bring those types of organizations and people into coverage under this ordinance. Second item is, we think the registration fee is a bit rich. I think we've had a long tradition in Portsmouth that fees are applied in the cost of doing and administering whatever issue you're involved in. We've all been through the business of the transfer station fees, and so we all have an understanding of that. But that's what we've been doing. We believe that the $100 for a unit, a dwelling, per year will be sufficient to provide the revenue to hire the company that will do the management of this program for us. In other words, the company that will do the searches online and then manage the complaints. Third item is we believe that the as written, and I don't think there's an intent here, but as written for the inspections required by each of these facilities that are affected under the ordinance, the owner is not scheduling these things. It's the town government that's doing it. I think that one needs to be worded a little more friendly, if I may use that term. The owner should be the one scheduling the visit, not the fire department, police department, and the planning department. So that will get around some of what we consider to be difficulties in it. We've spoken, others have spoken to the two visitors clause in paragraph 8. And I will just say that we agree. I think it's ambiguous whether that's 2 visitors overnight in each bedroom or in the entire dwelling. So that needs to be clarified because people will use it to their advantage, those that are inclined to do so. So it should be 2 persons per bedroom in the dwelling unit. And we have a good ordinance draft. It shows how we're going to do that, how the facility would be inspected, and the number of bedrooms will be identified, and the number of parking places that can be used by the facility. Because, it needs to be restricted to on-site or along the curb. We don't think a sign outside on the lawn or wherever it was supposed to be is an appropriate approach to this. The neighbors will know. If they don't know where it is, then there's no problem. If they do know it's a problem, then they already know where it is. They don't need a sign for them to know. And we also agree that we also believe that the notice itself that is to be posted, giving the telephone number and other personal data for those people to contact the owner, presuming an absent owner, is a little too intrusive. That will be available in the documents the town has before it in the planning office, I presume. So those things can be determined. We don't need to put people's name up on a sign, at least not yet, because I don't think that's going to be a problem here. I do understand from one of our members it was a problem in another community in this state, and that's where they got this from, probably. But that's where it got started, and I don't think we're there yet. So we should do the minimum that is necessary to get this ordinance to work and achieve the goals it needs to achieve. And most importantly, in our view, it needs to be extended from the area defined as the short term in the ordinance, from 31 days to 9 months, to cover those people who are longer-term resident that we believe is also a source of some of these problems. I will also point out that I've had personal experience with this, although the then police chief Seal took care of it just fine. I will add one other thing. We have one of our members who is operating one of these facilities in next door. And I think that the idea that this doesn't cover people who are doing it in their own home should be extended to people that say within 200 feet, because we've used that reference in here, 200 feet of the facility. That should be sufficient. I think we don't want to over-control people on this. We also want to make it as easy to operate for the town staff as we can. So that's all my remarks. If there's any comment or questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, thank you. My name is Richard Pavo. I live at 542 Walnut Street in Fall River, Massachusetts. I'm here to read a letter that I wrote on March 9th, and the purpose of the letter was to address something that I read in the paper about what's been going on with rental property, but more directly there were comments made about me and my personal business. I addressed the letter to Mr. Rainier and CC fellow council members, and there were some statements. The one most upsetting is the one where one of my properties is at 322 Riverside Street. I live right next door to Susan Panaggio Burgess. I'm not sure what her last name is these days. And the other one is across the street from Frank Fasaro. The one of concern is the 322 Riverside Street, where I was accused of renting presently to 6 to 8 people, which is an outright lie. I can provide documentation for whatever you need, lease agreements, whatever. Presently, it's a 645 square foot studio cottage with 1 bed in it. How I could get 6 to 8 people in that property? Not even in a party can you get 6 to 8 people in this house. So at any rate, I did write this letter, and I understand Ms. West has some copies if you need them, but I will read it. It's short. It's about 3/4 of a page, if you don't mind. My name is Richard Pavo, and I've been a tax-paying rental property owner in the town of Portsmouth for 12+ years. One of my 2 properties that I own in Island Park is at 322 Riverside, which is next door to Susan Panaggio Burgess, who has presented some incorrect accusations regarding my tenants and how they conduct themselves. The studio cottage with 1 bed has 640 square feet of living space. It has never been occupied, as my leases clearly state, by more than 2 people unless they had a child. My typical winter renters have included a Roger Williams University professor, a Roger Williams coach, a Rhode Island jewelry manufacturer distributor, a Rhode Island police officer and his business owner partner, Naval War College students, a retired naval officer, a New York orthodontist who rented for 4 years, who has a part-time practice in Rhode Island, Roger Williams law grad students, several undergrad students, and many repeat summer renters. Presently, this cottage is rented by a professional couple, one of whom is a Rhode Island educator, and the other is a manager at an upscale Rhode Island restaurant, not rented for 6 to 8 people, as Ms. Panaggio has stated. This is all verifiable with signed leases, which I will gladly provide to the council if needed, going back as many years as you'd like. My summer renters are typically repeat customers who rent for 1 to 5 weeks per stay. I do not deal with Airbnb nor VRBO. However, I did do business with VRBO for one summer several years ago. If there has ever been a noise or drinking issue, I've never been notified by the police of a disturbance. It's disappointing to me that someone can make false statements and accusations to the town council, which leaves me no choice but to defend myself and my business. All I ask is that the council members ask other neighbors for their opinions and observations of how I conduct my business. I've never been an absentee property manager. In the wintertime, I check my properties 2 or 3 times a week. During the summer season, I maintain my properties 5 times per week on average. Ms. Panagio Burgess apparently believes that because she has resided in Portsmouth for many years, she has more rights than neighbors with less residential history. An example of this is that she repeatedly harasses my tenants who have occasionally parked in front of her property. She has since currently placed multiple cement blocks on Riverside Street in front of her house to prevent anyone from parking on this public street. Thank you for your consideration and fairness.
Thank you, Mr. Feigl. Yes, sir.
I'm Susan Panagio, 324 Riverside Street. Mr. Rayner, I think I gave you a letter in response to that letter. I don't have a copy with me, so I'll try to go from there. As I said, I think it highlights the need for an ordinance. When I, on a Sunday morning, have 6 or 8 people under my window cracking beers, and they've been there the night before, and they're there that night, I guess they're living there. I don't know. How do I know? There's been a lot of people in that house. I'm just working off this because I don't have the letter I wrote you. Cinder blocks in Riverside Street, no. They are off-street on my property. As I pointed out, it is not it's not up to me to provide parking for Pabo, his tenants' friends. That's my off-site parking, 2 cars, 2 spots in front of my house. That's mine. As far as the police never contacting, I don't know why, because I've certainly made a lot of calls to the police station regarding that property. Recently, for the high-end restaurant owner and the Rhode Island educator that thought it was a good idea to roll in from the bars at 1:45 on September 16th this past fall and start a fire pit with, 6 to 10 of their BFFs after the bar closed. That went on till 6 o'clock in the morning. I think I submitted a whole list of phone calls I made to the police department and visits to the police department, in particular with the busted aquarium that the tenants threw in the cove. Like I said, I'm just working off the top of my head on that one. The remarks I had for tonight. I bought my house on Bluebill Cove over 30 years ago. It was a quiet one-way loop all the way at the end of Riverside. My daughter was 5 years old. She grew up in that house. She and her friends would ride their bikes, play in the cove, good thing nobody was throwing glass in it, and sleep out in the tent. I wouldn't allow any of this now if she was a child. Cars are speeding around the loop the wrong way. Thank you for the one-way sign. But again, people need to be made aware of the ordinances because nobody's paying attention to the one-way sign that you put up. There's people, walking around with open containers. There's people down in the private access drinking. Sleeping out in a tent. I wouldn't let her do that now. We've got people screaming and howling through the night. Or, one night I called because there were people fighting in the street. There was somebody passed out in your driveway. I didn't know if they were dead or alive. The police came that night. I think someone was arrested on an outstanding warrant. For over 20 years, I never had to call the police. I don't know how many times I've called the police over the last 10 years. What changed? Well, I started finding things like this in front of my house. I leave my house at 7:30 on a Sunday morning and there's 4 bodies passed out in a car in front of my house. I don't know if they're dead or alive. I went to the police station that day too. What changed? Short-term rentals. And the flip side, college rentals. It's a residential street. I understand there's a difference between renting a room in an owner-occupied home as opposed to an off-site landlord. because the chance of fire pits going on at 2 a.m. isn't probably going to happen if the landlord's around. What I often hear in this discussion, whether it's Newport, Middletown, Boston, Cambridge, because this is an issue in many places, is that the sense of the neighborhood identity, the culture is being lost. Oh, did I tell you somebody tried to get in my house one night recently? Dark out, I live alone, somebody's not knocking at my door, they're pulling on my door trying to get in, looking for the party. I don't need this. Sorry if I sound a little aggravated. Many people, landlords, show respect and consideration for their year-round residents and for their property. And thank you if you are respecting the people of the neighborhood and their property. It's been my experience, however, that we need some regulations to make sure that this is happening in all situations. Oh, and the little girls my daughter used to play with, their family moved after being in the neighborhood for about 40 years last year. They were driven out by the frustration of what's happening in the neighborhood. I thought this was interesting from the local papers this week, Newport County Legislative Forum. We live in an area that's highly desirable, so you have a lot of short-term rentals, which is driving up the cost and prices of homes and makes it very difficult. This is Attorney Turner Scott speaking in Newport. He went on to speak about the growth of short-term rentals in Newport and how, in his opinion, the city has yet to properly address the issues raised by this. In my mind, it's more of how these bed and breakfasts and guest houses are, even a small, how they're melding into the neighborhoods and how they should meld into neighborhoods. So yeah, I'd like to see some regulation as to occupancy, parking, people being made aware of ordinances. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My name is Tom Kenny. I live on 294 Indian Avenue.
Thank you, sir.
So I guess we're going to go is from one end of Portsmouth to the other end of Portsmouth and back to the other end again here. I live at 294. Excuse me?
Probably with some stops in the middle, too.
Oh, I haven't heard those yet. I guess they're to come yet.
They're behind you.
All right. By living in Indian Avenue the last 40 years, and the reason I'm living in Indian Avenue for the last 40 years is I was born and brought up in Newport. I was tired of Newport. Too much activity, too much going on, so I want to get residential. So now I'm living on Indian Avenue. When I moved out there, it was farmland. It wasn't even residential, it was farmland. So farmers sold the property. They built some new houses out there, nice homes. Everybody's getting along well. Until 2 years ago, my next door neighbor, who happens to be the same, he's already been mentioned here before, it's at 366, I think, Indian Avenue, with the problems with this B&B or not a B&B, but it's being rented. And for 2 years, I've endured this thinking that it would go away. It hasn't. It's gotten better. So over these 2 years, I have counted as many as 28 cars and trucks, whatever they are, parked in that area. It's the same house. It's about a 4-bedroom house, maybe 2,600 square feet on a very small lot, which is a lot that was grandfathered in. It's not an acre. It's probably between 5,000 and 10,000 square feet. But over this time, I've had as many as I can count, 28, but there's always been 20 or more the whole time for the last 2 summers, and I've counted them. They also have buses that come and pick them up sometimes in the day and take tours in Newport or anywhere they want to go, and sometimes they have other buses that take them at night to go out to dinner and whatever they want to do, and then they come back. And I don't want this to continue on. It's because this is a residential area which everyone out there wants to have a residential area to live in. This is not residential use. The license plates come from New York to New Jersey to any place you want to think of. And so it's just not one family lending out that house to another part of a family or to a friendly family or having other people come and just visit. This is changing, and it usually changes either on a weekly basis or on a weekend basis. And this is already happening now. This has been started already. Just this week, there was a one-week residence, and there was another week and 2 weekend residences, and the vehicles are all away from here. So my concerns is, primarily, is that I'd like to have the zoning here, which is residential, and I would like to keep and live in the home as a resident of a residential area. This is not a residential area what that house is being used for. I think we've all heard this a number of times already. So what I'd like to do is to find some way to stop what's going on here. It's not an Airbnb. I don't know what it is, but it's being rented. And the people that come there are different all the time. Different people twice in a week. So I'm concerned about the parking, the amount of people there, and at the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever it is, then they've been out, they've been in Newport, now they want to have some more fun. This has been on for 2 years, they're starting a 3rd year. I'd like to end this. I'd like to have this a residential area with residents, not as just a short-term rental for anybody that's there. Part of the things also is safety in that. I'm really concerned. If they have 20 cars there, they have at least 20 people in the building, whether they're, however it's associated, however you associate that, it's just too many. If you had a fire in that building, with the size of the building, it would be dramatic. So I'm trying to look for everyone's interest here. But primarily, I want it to be a residential area again, if we can do that. Is that my 2 minutes?
Give or take.
Thank you.
I haven't been very good at keeping that 2 minutes.
Thank you.
But there's not a long line, so we're doing okay. Mr. Marshall. How are you, sir?
Good. Bob Marshall, 794 Narragansett Avenue, Prudence Island. Short-term rentals aren't a new thing on Prudence Island, and they're not a problem. I fully understand. That doesn't take anything out of what anybody's saying here. I fully understand the problem you guys are having. It's happening in most of the towns. It's in the papers all the time. The problem is that the way you're fixing it is going to cause a problem on Prudence Island, because it's going to scoop up a lot of people that are doing things like this for as long as I've been out there, which is about 40 years, and make it so that they are going to have trouble doing what they've always been doing, and also for the renters that have been probably for 40 years doing exactly this. And the difference is that for most people, you're talking that they rent their house out 2, 3, 5 weeks a year. It's not what you're describing here. And they tend to, my cottage is like that. It's about 4 or 5 weeks a year that we rent it when we're not using it. It's about 7 families that fill those 4 weeks, same ones all the time. They keep coming back, they want to come back, they don't cause trouble. And I know that, from my time on the island, that most people that have cottages are doing this. When they're not using them, they rent them so that they can afford to pay you the taxes. The other side of it is that there are very few that have been problems over the years. I mean, the time I've been there, there's 1 or 2 houses that have been a problem. Neighbors kind of got on the people that owned them, and it solved it. So my suggestion is that if you're going to solve the problem on the mainland, that's nice, but let's not create a new problem out on the island. If there's a way that you can exclude the enforcement out there, it would make sense. The other thing on most of these cottages, even when they're not rented and people are using them themselves, are they going to be out of compliance? I mean, is rent part of the definition? Because most of the cottages, are over-occupied by your definitions when they're being used. I mean, mine always was when I was a kid and my family was using it. It wouldn't meet that definition.
If you're the owner and it's your family, this doesn't apply.
Yeah, but I mean, but you've got, the weeks that my family's there and using it, it's okay to have that many people, but the week that some family that has rented it for the last 30 years is there, it's not okay. It's a different situation. And we don't have the density issues that you have, in the areas where the cottages are. Most of the people are using them as cottages. It's not that you're trying to go to work the next morning and, there's a little noise next door. So, thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. Edward Allen, 26 Atlantic Avenue.
Thank you, sir.
I've been a resident of Portsmouth for 43 years. I lived 40 years on Aquidneck Avenue. Never had any issues with Airbnb. There were no rentals down there. Had a few issues with college students, but I now live on Atlantic Avenue for the last three years. We built a new house there. My neighbor purchased the house next to me last summer. There was a new septic system put in for a two-bedroom house. He has since converted the two-bedroom house into 4 bedrooms without a permit. He's done extensive renovations on the outside with block to enclose the septic system, and we found out fairly recently that he was going to be renting this on Airbnb. It is advertised on Airbnb as a 4-bedroom house with a capacity of 12. Two beds in the common area. And this is on a 40 by 100 lot, very small lot size. So last month, we had 3 rentals. The first rental was a one-night stand. There were 10 cars. They put as many as they could in the driveway. The rest were on the street. As you know, Atlantic Avenue is not a large street. And from what I understand, from their review on Airbnb, there were 13 people in the house. The second rental was a one-night stand. I believe there were probably 8 people. There were 4 cars. The third rental was a one-night stand. And I don't see anything. I went over the draft very quickly, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see anything about limiting the duration of the rentals to possibly 3 days or longer. I think if you're going to have one-night rentals, that is a formula for party houses. $400 a night is what they charge. 12 people at $400 a night, that's $33 each. That's a pretty cheap night out.
It is, but the way the ordinance is written, once that, we'll just use your example here, once that 2-bedroom septic house is surveyed and found to be advertising for 4 bedrooms, they'd be out of compliance with the ordinance. And any day they rented it as more than 2 bedrooms, it would be, it's $100 the first time, $250 the second, $500 the third. So the fines would add up, and they would end up paying more of a fine than they got in rent, is how that would be washed out.
It was not very clear, and I just went over the draft very quickly, so correct me if I'm wrong, it was not very clear about who would enforce this ordinance.
It'd be a combination of the police, the zoning office, and probably the planning office.
I will say we have contacted the building inspector. He said he could not go inside the house. He's prohibited from going inside the house. But he was concerned about an outdoor shower they had built. It was right on the property line of my neighbor on the other side of them, and actually was partly on town property from the school. We're at the bottom of Hathaway School field, and they came down last week and actually moved the shed. But I also question where that outdoor shower is going to drain to. So, this is an issue, and we have confirmed from DEM that septic design is for a 2-bedroom house. So I just want you to understand what we're up against. This is just a start for us. We haven't been dealing with this very long, but I'd like to stop it before it gets too bad.
Understood.
Okay.
Thank you,
for
sir.
your consideration.
Appreciate it. Mr. Harris.
Good evening. I own a house.
I'm gonna make you stop, and because you weren't here earlier, can you state your name and your address?
Oh, yeah, I got to do that.
It's a public hearing.
Some of you
Thank
don't know me. Jonathan Harris, 84 East Terrace, Portsmouth. So I own a home
that we do summer rentals. We've done so successfully for 5 years. And it was a home that was in my neighborhood that was, and we have a strong homeowners association, by the way, that was overgrown with landscaping. It had a fence caving in on the pool area. The pool was brown with frogs living in it. The neighbors were wild. We were getting ready to file a lawsuit against the owner with the homeowners restrictions. And one day I drove in and the auctioneer was in the front yard and he said, I'm auctioning the house tomorrow, and I went and bought it. And I spent about $250,000 redoing the landscape, the pool, the fence, and then I had this house. And I said, what the heck am I going to do with it? Now I look out my window, it looks beautiful, the neighbors were happy. So for short-term capital gain reasons, we rented it for the summer. And we had a lot of demand. The president of one of the public companies that picks up packages every day is one of my renters, as was a Hollywood movie star, as was the president of a bank in Boston. That's the kind of renters that I get in this home. That's the kind of renters that come to this community. So I hear what this woman was talking about, very, very different dynamics going on within the homes. And this ordinance, as applied to many of the homes that I know in town, I think could constitute an unfair taking of rights of property, because the restriction is such that you're saying and telling me I can only have, if there's 3 bedrooms, and this is a for instance, you're telling me I can only have 6 people. Now, in my home, and I own a ski home in New Hampshire, by the way, and I rent that in the summer because we don't use it. In one of my bedrooms there, I have 4 bunk beds. It's a big bedroom, and it's meant to have kids. Often we get a husband and a wife and another husband and wife, or family members, their aunts and uncles, whatever it might be, come and rent the home, and then they may have 5 or 6 children with them, and they may be over the age of 6. So we could have 9 people, 10 people. Our limit is 10, and we comfortably sleep 10 people in this home. But the sleeping situation is such that in one bedroom we have 4 people. So this automatically is telling me you're knocking out our rental base, because we often get 9 or 10. And I've never had a complaint. We've been doing this well for 5 years. I pay Patriot Disposal to take away all the garbage. I employ landscapers. I send everybody to Clements Market. I send everybody to the pizza places in town. I think the majority of the owners that own properties that do this are responsible. And I don't think they need the hand of government necessarily invading their home and potentially violating some of their property rights. And I also sympathize with stories about irresponsible ownership. I question if it is short-term rentals or more college. And I think that you already have rules on the books with parking, with noise ordinances. I mean, if somebody's up screaming and yelling at 2 o'clock in the morning, the police need to respond to this. And you already have these rules on the books, and if you need to tighten them up, I think you should. But I think, you either water this down, you may have to grandfather some homes. I can document, I've been doing this for 5 years. I don't really want to comply with some of these rules that say I have to notify all the neighbors. They already know. All my neighbors have my cell phone number. If there was ever a problem, they call me. And I think that's generally the idea with most. I think you probably have a few bad actors here, and I think you should throw the book at them, but you have other means to do that within ordinances in the town without creating more. And I really think you have to be thoughtful of this, because I did send along some information to some council members. Airbnb and HomeAway have filed suits in cities across the country and have been successful when there's an overreach here. And one of the elements of real estate is it has investment value. It's not just your home. It is rentability is a fundamental part of real estate. And we're in a new economy here, and we're in a vacation area, and that's good. That's good. Newport County's crushing it. You go into other parts of the state, it almost looks like a depression. Here we don't, and there's a lot of money spent here from this group of people. As far as septic systems, I hear a lot of talk about that. I'm responsible for my septic system, as is every other homeowner in this town. If somebody ruins my septic system, then I got to pay for it. I don't think you guys write checks for that. And I have mine pumped 4 times a year just because I don't know what goes down that toilet. And we have signs all around the house that talk about septic, 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 septic. I think the town could do wonders by making recommendations to owners and telling them what the expectations are, what you have drafted in here regarding what the rules to abide by with renters is in my rental agreement. It says, no noise after 10 p.m. You do not exceed the number of people in this home, and it goes on and on. Dispose of the trash in the receptacles provided, and so on and so on. So, I think instead of expecting the worst, maybe suggesting to owners that they tighten up their agreements will do a lot. I think we're all responsible property owners for the most part. Again, a couple of bad actors. The guys with the badges maybe need to get a little bit more funding to go after them, but go get them. I don't think 4 or 5 bad actors should wreck it for everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Evening. John Hanks, 86 Therian Road. I own a property next door, or more or less next door, and it's a home that was in the family, has been in the family, it's been passed down, and we continue to use it as our family house when we want to go to the shore. But when we're not using it, we do rent it out and allow that process through HomeAway and VROB, and it's been almost a lifesaver. It's allowed us to cover the taxes, mostly only the taxes, but it also allows for some insurance and minor upkeeps if need be. So it's been very helpful in that regard. Also, we have had individuals from around the world visit, which has been phenomenal, not only for, I think, the community, but for me personally, to be able to meet people from around the world. We've never had a problem with over occupancy of the house, and I can think of individuals that have tried, and we have a really well-written lease that we close them down on and ask them not to. But I also want to, the gentleman before me, I think, touched on a lot of things I was going to touch on, but I do want to touch on a few things that are actually in the ordinance. The reporting requirement, I assume as the council knows that the Rhode Island law section 3418-22.3 requires out-of-state renters, out-of-state owners to register with the state and the town if they have a rental in it. So I understand that expanding that to, individuals that live inside town as well, just for access, makes sense. I do have difficulty with the $100 per bedroom. I don't understand the difference between a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom. This is not like a food truck. You can't add bedrooms without a permit and all that, which I understand. You can't take away bedrooms. So, town of Portsmouth or town of Newport has a $55 that's broken up between inspection and actual registration fee. And the fee is, my understanding, is to cover the cost of administration and licensing, staffing, and all that. So the increase that exponentially because of bedrooms, it seems unfair that someone that pays $400 because they have a 4-bedroom place, do they have more access, not access? Do they get privilege in front or something? And they're going to be continuing to pay that for no ending. The septic, I get that. I understand that to some degree. Again, I think the gentleman before me touched upon that. I mean, we have stuff in our lease as well about it, and payment goes to the owner or to the renter if they mess up our septic. But, as a responsible owner, we make sure it's pumped out if we think it needs to be pumped out more. I think it's difficult to understand. I don't know the engineering of septics. I really don't care enough about fecal matter to learn about it. But understanding that this ordinance is written by 2 people, that's how the septic tanks are built. That's for 24-hour, 365 days. That's the engineering specs on it. I've had family members in there. Sometimes we have more or less, and any home I've ever been in. Sometimes we have more, sometimes we have less. I don't know how that plays into such short-term rentals. We, really basically our season here in Portsmouth is summer, minor sometimes during the winter, but So I don't know if that is a good standing. The parking, limiting the occupancy by parking, I have to question if the bedroom, if it has a 3-bedroom place and there's not enough parking for the ordinance, and the person now has only a 2-bedroom place because of the decision, they've lost a bedroom, and is that now not taking and do some type of compensation for a loss of that? I do question. As far as the host compliance firm, from my understanding and all that, it's great. They send in, you have an app on your phone, they can send it in, pictures. And honestly, I don't know how that works. I think that starts getting to hearsay if you have to go to court. Secondary evidence, I question. Also, they're basically providing a Google search, which is phenomenal, but I think we could do better is just, they have a system set up on our website, Portsmouth, that you can file complaints. I understand it's mostly for potholes and stuff, but expanding that to some degree, it could be as for non-emergency situations, might make it. The other thing is safety. The trespassing, to see the signs is a concern. Having data out there in front, showing people that this house may be unoccupied is a concern for many residents or owners. We deal with fraud constantly on Craigslist, with our place being taken off the website and thrown up on there, and having individuals contact us after they found our place online through our usual hosting platforms. Having our address out there would just make that much easier, and we'd have to deal with them directly, and that can be confrontational. The emails that have gone back and forth have been very disturbing, and have reported those to our third party, or to our platform. I just also wonder how this process is appeals. You end up going through this process. Are we getting a special permit, not getting a special permit? Is there a hearing? It sounds like we just are given to it, and then it can be taken back if any, after inspection has been happened. So I asked the board to look at that and say that. One last thing is they comment on 3 strikes, basically. That you can go 3 times in court. You can actually lose the right to rent. I question that, as if that has been preempted by the state. They have legislation stating that owners may rent on these platforms, and so by taking away, I understand it's for a short period of time, but they can re-up in 12 after the 12 months. I don't know why the license would be given again if they're such a problem, but if you are going to take it away, has that been preempted by the state saying that you are required to allow them to do that? So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrew Muller, 180 Bayview Avenue, Portsmouth. I have a couple questions for you, too.
Sure.
One is, you have short-term rentals and leases. With a short-term rental, if there's a problem with that tenant, you can get them out immediately. If I have a year or 2 lease with somebody and they're a problem, or I have to evict them, that's going to take forever, and it's going to be more problems. Personally, I have 2 properties that I rent out with leases, and I have 2 Airbnbs. I like the Airbnbs because I have more control over them than a lease. If I never had a problem with anybody with an Airbnb. I rented doctors, lawyers, I had even a Grammy winner. They patronize the local businesses, restaurants. They're 50s, 60s. They're very responsible people. I've never had one complaint. Now we go into this matter. It's, again, responsibility, I could be the word. I'm listening to both sides, and I feel for both sides. What we have is a few irresponsible people, it appears to be, and now we're going to have an ordinance changed for everyone because a few people can't follow simple common sense rules and decency. Another thing I would ask, too, if you are going to make this ordinance, to please give us time to do an analysis of our rentals, because I would probably go to a lease. Because the Airbnb, a lot of people think you make a lot of money off this Airbnb. I particularly don't, because I only rent 6 months out of the year, so I have more control of my property, less wear and tear. Another factor I would say is with the lease, again, I'll go to the lease and just rent out all year round, and it'll be more wear and tear on my property, and it'll probably have somebody going to school, and it'll cost the town more money in the long run. It's just a thought. You know, you have to analyze the rental income, and is it really worth doing an Airbnb versus a lease? And right now, it's pretty close. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I was wondering the same thing.
Yeah. Good evening. I'm Joe Rideout, 63 Attleboro Avenue in Comet Fence Point. Graduated here in 1971. I am in Airbnb 4 years. I feel like I'm in an AA meeting here. You know, I am one of those. I think it should be noted that Airbnb can be 1 day, 2 days. It can be any number of days. It can be a homeowner renting out his or her residence, or you can have a separate unit. I personally rent out my personal residence. I do it for 14 days a year, and only 14 days a year, because the federal government allows me to do that and not pay taxes on 14 days of rent.
Yes.
So any ordinance you have has to waive that residence 14 days rule to coordinate with the federal government, in my opinion. Okay, again, I can rent my house for 14 days without paying taxes on that money. It's my residence. The only other issue I have is putting my name and number out on a tag. I would love to have all the cars in this town that aren't registered with a great big tag on it with the person who owns it and with their name and number. I'd also like to have all the people who have DUIs have names and numbers on their front yard. I mean, this can get out of control. Okay, obviously I think I'm making my point because I saw a couple smiles. But my experience after 40 years of renting all over this island is that you have bad managers and you have good managers. The good managers are going to continue to do a good job. The bad managers, regardless of your ordinance, are going to find a way around it and they're going to piss you off. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir.
There's no line, so I figured I would just jump up here. My name's Katie Donovan. I live at 49 Fisher Circle in Portsmouth. I happen to be a real estate agent, and I was sitting here, I wasn't going to speak at all. I was just curious about the implications of this for the real estate market. And what I realized when I was just listening to everyone is that I have a client who's purchasing a home in Island Park tomorrow. And they purchased the home as an investment property with a business model in mind. And this business model will be drastically affected if this goes into play. And this is a family that is purchasing their first investment property. So for me, it's very important that I understand this and that it becomes very well known what it is, because this is going to now affect my pendings, my properties on the board that I'm closing, because several of my clients are purchasing as investment properties in Portsmouth. It's very desirable to live here, and it's going to drastically affect their business model. So, you know, I think we need to keep in mind that, you know, Portsmouth is very desirable for both, you know, primary residence and second homes, but we're now shifting sands for these people. They have no idea what their business model is going to be. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Bob Power. I have a property in a family trust on 57 Water Street. I've lived in Newport all my life. I'm also here representing somebody who lives on Indian Avenue. And the only thing I'm going to say to you is, because I've lived in Newport all my life, is I'm sitting here listening to what's transpired in Newport over the last 20 years. And you just heard from somebody who said somebody's coming to town to buy a piece of property, and they're not coming to live in it. It's going to be a business model. And I grew up in Newport, and there were all these little neighborhoods, and we had all these little schools, and then all the names on your sports teams out here are all Newport families who moved out because they didn't want to live in Newport. They wanted to have the white picket fence. And then when their kids graduate, they move back to Newport because it's closer to the restaurants, and they're older, and they don't want to have to drive as far. So the only thing I would just say to you, as a community that I've been living in the other community that's kind of already going through some of this, is that you're going to have to do something to get out in front of it, because if you don't, you're going to be back here 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Your police department's going to have issues of trying to enforce things. It's going to get worse because it's a very desirable place to be. People are buying houses in Newport. They come from out of town. They're not there in the wintertime. They go to Florida.
They rent them out. We had party houses for a while. The party houses have simmered back down because the city council and the police department had to jump on top of them. But it's going to be a constant battle because we live in a place that people want to be, Portsmouth, Middletown, whatever it is, on the island, and you're going to be struggling with this. So you're going to have to do some kind of regulation. I know that people like, to not have regulations, but unfortunately, because of what some of these people will do to take advantage of this community and to abuse the community and make it difficult on the people that live here, you're going to have to do something.
Thank you, sir.
Fighting over here. My name is
No
Nancy.
fighting.
No fighting.
No
My name is Nancy Borden-Weeda. I live at 206 Canonchit Drive, and my family's had a long history of being in Portsmouth. We own the Borden Farm Apartments. When my husband and I first got married, we were able to build our house down behind there on the property that was our family's. Then a few years later, our neighbor right next door wanted to sell her house, and she came over and said to my husband, your mother-in-law wants to buy the house. Do you want to live next to your mother-in-law? And so my husband said yes. So anyway, many years later, my mom has passed, and I inherited the house. And we want to keep it for the family, and our family's there most of the time, and we, the finances of it. So anyway, we would like to do a short-term rental. I'm weighing in on all of this, and it's making me a little nervous now with all of this that's going on, but we are right next door. She's 358 Water Street. I'm 206 Canonchit Drive. I'm going to police that place. I mean, we always go to VRBOs, and I know what kind of people I'd like to have, and so I'd just like to put that into your consideration, that if you're right next door, and I do feel bad for all these people that are having such a horrible time, because I would just quit. I'd have a nightmare. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I hate coming in and making comments, not being part of this meeting. I was in bed with my 3 kids up until about half an hour ago.
Which unfortunately you missed the original instructions. Can you give us your name and your address, please?
Sorry
Thank
about
you.
that. My name
That's
is
okay.
Chris Souza. I live at 708 Mitchell's Lane in Middletown, Rhode Island. And I had a friend call me and say, hey, someone just talked about your house on Indian Ave. I run a house in Newport. I own 3 houses in Middletown that are Airbnbs, and I own 3 houses in Portsmouth that are Airbnbs and HomeAways. I'm also on the zoning board in Middletown, so I had a little bit of input on their code in Middletown. Met with the city planner when they wrote that code, and I don't know if they listened to me, but I'd like to think they listened to a few things I said. The first thing you might want to consider is, I don't know how many people are in this room, but think about if you've ever gone on vacation before, if you've ever rented a house. So if anyone in this room has ever gone on vacation before and rented a house, say in the Caribbean or Florida or Arizona or California, you're part of this business already, whether you live next to one or whether you're running one. What I've learned in the 5 years I've been doing this, and I started off by accident, is that there is a lot of money in it, regardless of what anyone's going to tell you. There's a lot of money in it. And there's definitely a responsible way to do it, and there's an irresponsible way to do it. The responsible way to do it is to try to figure out who you're renting to and scare the heck out of them before they arrive. So that if there are any, I threaten my people with fines that actually don't exist because I don't feel like there's enough enforcement on the island. A friend of mine is a judge and an attorney on the island. Not going to mention his name, but we talk about this all the time because I'm scared to death you're going to take this privilege away from me. This is what I do for a living now. He seems to think the key is to charge disorderly conducts. Right now you have noise violations, you bring people in, you give them a slap on the wrist. My understanding is that disorderly conduct is a felony. And it's it's also something that could carry a large fine and generate revenue for the city, not that that's what's important. I think the city should be involved. The state is already involved. The state is collecting God knows how much revenue now that they're becoming dependent on. So this is for the most part a reality at this point. And the best way to do it, personally, I think, is to tax the heck out of it and make people accountable for their homes and make sure that the people who own the homes are accountable to their neighbors, that they can be reached by phone at any hour of the day. I've calculated before, I've done over 600 rentals. The police were called to one of my houses one time at 2 in the morning. My neighbor actually called me and said, hey, get over here. I just called the police. I got over there. They were out on the deck talking. The police wouldn't even walk up on the property. They said they weren't loud enough to even do any kind of enforcement. So that's 0.25% of all my rentals I had a problem at. I heard a gentleman here before say he rents to families, doctors, lawyers. Most of my people are parents of the bride and groom. I do a lot of bachelorette parties. I refuse to rent to bachelor parties. I refuse to rent to young men. But that's at every landlord's discretion, how they want to run things. I don't know who the gentleman was that had the problem at 336 Indian Ave, but I'd love to meet him. I'd love to do anything I can to accommodate him, give him my phone number. My understanding was he said there were buses and cars and things like that. Yeah, people call me sometimes and they say, yeah, we have to go to a wedding. We don't want to drink and drive. Who do we use for a shuttle to shuttle our group to the wedding? And I refer all kinds of people to restaurants, caterers, breakfast places, restaurants, clothing stores. I mean, this brings a lot of business into the community. I think it's almost immeasurable at this point because the city of Newport just hired someone to do research. There's a lot of money in this. And if you shut this down, you're shutting down a really important part of our tourism. And people like to travel with their families now. They don't like to stay in hotels. They like to stay in a nice house. And 0.1% of the people who stay in these houses are people that cause problems. You probably find more problems out in your average neighborhoods during the course of a week. You read a police log on Monday morning. It's always the same neighborhoods, the same bad people. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Souza.
My name is Yancy Sullivan. I live at 40 Atlantic Avenue. We have the same, we abut, Ed Allen is on one side, I am on the other side. One of the problems that we have already been up against is the first group of renters that came in, the first thing they did was to set up their beer pong game. And I question that some were even 21 years old. So that would be number one. We've had experience with Roger Williams students in our neighborhood that have not been positive, so I'm unhappy about that. The other thing is about Atlantic Avenue itself. The speed limit on Atlantic Avenue is 15 miles an hour. The sign is very hard to see. It's used as a cut-through for people that go to Island Park. There have been many times where people have almost been knocked over because there are so many people that walk their dogs and the speed limit is out of control. So I think the town should enforce the speed limit. And also what we don't have is a sign that says there is no parking on this side of the street, because some of the renters have already tried to park on neighbors' lawns, and there's only been 3 groups of renters. So my concern is that we could just make it visible that there's no parking on one side of the street, and that we could have more enforcement of the speed limit, and that would go a long way for us. Thank you.
Okay. Outside this ordinance, but I think we can look at that. Chief is taking notes, I see. Thank you, sir. Anyone else have comments on the ordinance?
Just very quickly, Edward Allen again, 26 Atlantic Avenue. I'd just like to know if you would considering having a minimum amount of days rental. I would suggest 3 days. That would give people a nice long weekend. They come here for a graduation or something, they can go into Newport and enjoy it. I think one-night rentals are a recipe for disaster. So I would like you to seriously consider that.
We'd have to look and see what kind of case law exists already to see if it would pass muster. Mr. Moore?
Jim Moore, 217 Indian Avenue. Just to comment on a couple of things. This actually is for Chief Lee. In our discussion in the working group, the question of how the police would know who was a renter and who was a guest and who was appropriately at that location brought us to the need for registration of the names and addresses and so forth of the renters. And I think he said that it was important that if the police were called in the situation of an expected violation of the regulation of the ordinance, that the policeman or policewoman have some evidence of who is supposed to be there, who are the registered people. And his suggestion to make it easier for the policeman is to have it outdoor, not a sign in the front yard saying this is a short-term rental and these are the people who are staying there, but some evidence on the property. And I'm not sure, perhaps I have it wrong, but that there was also a suggestion that this information be provided inside the house, so that at least there wasn't a discussion about who should be there and on what basis they were there. The last gentleman who, as he said, he has 6 Airbnbs on the island, and my guess he's going to be the magnate of Airbnbs. He may have many more because it's such a terrific business model. It's not a single-family residential home attraction. It's a terrific business model located in single-family residential home districts. So I think that's very clear. And finally, I think the lady who I think she's precisely correct in saying we need to make a decision soon, because this model is going to overwhelm this town very quickly, because it does make enormous sense for the individual investor owner. Whether it makes sense for the people who live nearby as residents is hard to say. So I'll stop. And finally, Prudence Island, just for what it's worth, I think that's a special world. To get there, you have to get a boat. You don't get to go to Newport in your car or your bus or your caravan. You tend to go there by boat and stay there. It has a long special history in this town. Personally, I think an exemption or something that treats Prudence Island a little bit differently is worthy of consideration. Thank you.
Getting up, Fred? Okay. How are you? Yeah.
Frederick Stevenson, 23 Baldwin Road and 542 Narragansett Avenue, Prudence Island. I wanted to echo Bob Marshall's comments earlier about Prudence Island, and then also the gentleman that just spoke about being a special world. It is very, very unique. I sit here and I listen to all the stories about bad things going on with rentals in the town of Portsmouth, thinking, thank God that's not Prudence Island. We do, as a matter of fact, I manage 15 short-term rentals in the summertime. There are no one is actually an investor. These are all people renting out their homes for part of the summer, and typically it's just to defray their costs, maybe their taxes, their insurance, their water bill, things like that. And then they're using it 99% of the year outside of the rental season, which really is only from about July 1st to Labor Day. As far as number of complaints from renters misbehaving, I'm usually the one that gets the call. I think the chief could probably tell you that they don't get a lot of calls about problems on Prudence Island. Yeah, he just kind of echoes that. And so I think that as much as you folks probably need this ordinance on the mainland, we would like to see if we could be excluded on Prudence Island. If it ever got out of hand, we could certainly be added on. But for now, I think we would appreciate it if you took us off the ordinance. And I probably speak for the Hog Island people too. Thank you.
Fred River, 271 Sprague Street. I came here to support this ordinance because I felt that I used to live in Newport. I'm from Newport, and Newport has been represented previously, has had extreme problems with this. They're finally getting their arms around it, I think. And I think, as Bob Powers said earlier, getting your arms around this is critical because it's growing exponentially, as Mr. Moore said earlier. And so I think the ordinance that's been proposed is pretty clear, straightforward, and enforceable. I think it's as far as the revenue is concerned, I don't know. I listened to the issue about whether it should be $100 per unit or $100 per bedroom. I don't know the answer to that. but clearly some amount of registration money needs to be collected to enable the initial enforcement of this. And the other thing is the carbon dioxide and or carbon monoxide, excuse me, and the fire alarm systems. We may discover that a number of these rental units don't have this, and that would be important for public safety. So I'm basically in support of this. It may need to be tweaked in one respect or another, but fundamentally I think it's a good law to have on the books.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
My name is, well, it's Jane Hanks, but I go by Jan. My address is 86 Therian Road, and as my son spoke up earlier, John Hanks, we do have the house down, and it's been a family house we're trying to keep. But I joined back in February when I saw the article in the newspaper, and I called the town and found out there was going to be a meeting. And so, but by the time we joined, the ordinance, all the, they've already had put a lot of time into it, and I really appreciate the ones that have done it, because that's a lot of work. But I just want to, I came to the meeting originally because I wanted them to have another voice. That, yeah, I understand there's issues, and it seems like there's a handful of houses that are problems, but it's not all of us. That we're starting into our third season. We're already booked, into September, and it'll start like in May. And so it would be nice to, I think the ordinance, I understand that we do need to have something, but also when I did start this back in 2016, I went to one of those home away meetings, right, where you go to it and it's a big weekend convention. And it was really good for me and to learn. And one of the issues I picked up right away in listening to other people talking is, yeah, the one-nighters, they're party nights. You don't rent out for one night without thinking that someone's coming for one night and they, most likely are going to party, And so I started out with doing 3 nights. And we do rent out to, like John said, for people all over the world that come, and all over the United States and all over. So, and I've not had any issues, but I'm right there. I'm very close. And when I don't even rent out to, like wedding parties, because they're there to have a party. And I appreciate that. And so I don't want my house to be used that way. And so I don't know what we do, except maybe we go back a little bit and draw from tonight, because I do think if it's possible, maybe you do put a little bit of regulation where you don't do one-nighters. That would stop. And then, of course, the 9-month idea is really a nice idea too, because then it starts touching some of these party places, maybe. I don't know, because I've always heard that, oh yeah, Roger Williams or the college students, and somebody that's out there at 2 o'clock in the morning and still drinking. I mean, we don't do that. I mean, I have in my lease, after 10:30, it's quiet. And we live in a neighborhood where during the summer, because it's on the water, and people that own their houses and have had them since the 30s, they're used to partying during the summer. And but everybody always respected. There was always, you turned your party off and you lowered your noise. So I do think that maybe we do need to help the ones over in Island Park that are having some real issues, but I think that we're not monsters doing this. And I kind of get this feeling when people start talking that, like we're all grouped to that party group people, and we're not. And I think the majority of people that rent aren't. We have very interesting people that have rented from us. So I think we need to kind of go back before we make any decisions tonight and tweak a little bit and make this right. So I don't think there's anything wrong with having an ordinance. Last time, 2 weeks ago, when we were here, it was interesting to get to meet a few of the people afterwards, and it was like, wow, you know, maybe we could start a little group and get together, and try to figure this all out, and maybe we can meet once ever so often if somebody has an issue or has a problem or something like that. So, thank you. And thank you for all the work, because I know you guys worked really hard on it.
Thank you very much. Please.
Hi, my name is Donna Greer, down on 18 Atlantic Avenue. And I just wanted to say, like the real estate representative, I'm actually in the insurance aspect of it. And Newport, Middletown, and I know this is more a global situation at the same time with this Airbnb and renting out homes, and it is a whole different direction. And I certainly appreciate a lot of people standing up and talking that have been doing it for quite a while, the responsible citizens, I think, of Portsmouth. We have a couple houses on our street. One has been doing Airbnb or something very similar for a while, and very, blends right into the neighborhood, very respectable with their incoming guests and so forth. But we do have, I think what the bigger problem, again, on the insurance aspect of it, and Middletown, Portsmouth, is a lot of the growing concerns that we're hearing is really the outer-towners, those people that are buying those houses, those properties, and that's their purpose, all right? And the one-nighters, again, those type of exposures. So those are the big problem, and I think, again, with Mr. Powers and this gentleman here, it's something that I think you do definitely have to get our arms around. I do have a question. When we talk about the bedrooms, because that seems to come up with a fee or a fine, has the discussion of square footage per occupant been reviewed or discussed? It is in there, okay. Okay, so that's all included. I haven't seen the draft, so I apologize for that question.
I don't see that in this ordinance. Where?
So I just wondered if that was more of, as well, an area to reconsider versus the bedroom issue. So, but again, I'm supporting the ordinances because I do think, again, going forward, just from sitting in the insurance aspect and the real estate, that it is something that is going to be bigger and better, in a lot of people's minds, especially those out-of-town, which is what our concern on our street is just an out-of-towner with those one-night rentals and going forward. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Don't be shy. Obviously, that we've got a lot to think about and discuss here as a council. The way these public hearings work is once I call 3 times, we close the public hearing, and then the council has discussions. So if you are thinking you might want to say something, you've got a couple more minutes to do that. So is there anybody else who wants to talk either way? Mr. Moore, you want to say something real quick again?
Just a last comment.
Sure.
As I said, this is not about neighbors against neighbors. This is not about eliminating Airbnb. 2 persons per bedroom allows 8 people in a 4-bedroom house, as long as it doesn't violate our existing septic and doesn't violate parking. So I think this business actually facilitates and this business operating in a reasonable fashion in our single-family residential districts. And maybe I'm making a mistake and misunderstand it, but I think this allows responsible property owners to manage their properties in a responsible fashion and be sure that everyone else who's in that business will have to do so as well. So the lady who just, and her husband, the Hanks, they can be comforted that they're not going to have irresponsible operators, having 20 people in a house or 12 people in a 2-septic house, ruining this business for everybody else. That's what this ordinance was meant to do. I mean, I saw it as actually kind of a handshake between homeowners and this new world of Airbnb to create a viable way to have a relationship together that benefited both the neighborhood and the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once. One more time. Last chance. Can I have a motion from the council to close the public hearing?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. We have heard a lot of different information this evening. I will give you my couple of 2 cents here on sections of the ordinance. One, I am completely against the scarlet letter and sticking a sign in somebody's front yard. Narragansett tried this many years ago for party houses, sticking an A on a door that says, you know, they were charged with a party house, and that didn't work out very well for them. I do believe in the registration. I think it could be as easy as an Excel spreadsheet that is on a desktop at the police station in the zoning office, and they can look and say, okay, 599 Smith Street, the person to contact is this person. We don't have to have it out front where anybody and their uncle could just drive by, and I think that gets far too into personal property rights. I'm trying to wrap my head around where a 7-year-old became an adult.
Yeah, me too.
I have 2 kids who thankfully have grown past 7 years old. And I'm probably more nervous leaving them alone now than I would be when they were 7. But I think that number should probably be closer to 12. I think of the grandparents renting a house. I'll use the example that was used earlier tonight. Grandparents come in, they rent a 4-bedroom house. They bring in 2 adult kids with their wives or spouses. And they each bring 3 or 4 kids, and now we're up above the maximum limit if a couple of them have to be 9 years old. I don't think that is the issue we're having in town, where a family becomes a party house and there's 12-year-olds jumping on trampolines, drinking beers. So I would like to see that number at least go to 12. I understand where the issues are coming from. It's the rentals of the houses to newly minted young adults from the ages of, say, 21 through 29, 30, coming down, whether it be a night, 2 nights, 3 nights, or a week. And we do need to find a way to balance out the rights of both the property owners who are using it as a business and the neighbors who are living there full time. And I think we can do that respectfully for both sides. Yes, Prudence Island is a special place, and so is Hogg. But I'm not sure we can exempt them, and we'll have to look into that. The crux of the ordinance is that if there are no violations, nobody's going to call. If there's no issues, nobody's going to call. If a family out on Prudence Island rents out a 4-bedroom house and has 10 people in it, or, you know, there are 8 people and 2 allowed guests, and they're not making any racket, nobody's going to call. It's probably more than a handful, but, you know, let's say it's a dozen houses that there have been issues at. I will tell you that there have not been a lot of police reports. I mean, I didn't task the chief to pull out every police report of an Airbnb or party house. I would venture to guess that more of the issues are probably college renters from the 9 months than it is the weekend renters from Airbnb or VBRO. Airbnb seems to be getting a lot of playtime tonight, so Vacation by Owner and all the other sites that are out there. So those are those 2 big ones are the ones that jump out at me as to being in there. The registration fee, I would be okay with lowering the registration fee and raising the fines. So if we had, say, a lower registration fee where we have the ability to make sure that we can get into a house, look at it, find those people who are, as the example was tonight, have a 2-bedroom septic, and 4 bedrooms they're renting out. We use septics because that's what we have in town. The 2-bedroom septic rule is or whatever number of septic your septic system happens to be sized by is what state law goes by. So that's the easiest way for us to figure out how many people can legitimately be in a house. Now, if you buy a 3-bedroom house and it's for you and your family, we really can't do anything about you having 20 people in that house. But you can't rent it out to 20 people. So, those are my general comments at this point in time. Anybody else from the council want to start? Go ahead, Mr. Aguirre.
All right, just to follow up on a couple, and I did write down the issue with the 12-year-olds, maybe 6 becoming 12 years old. That seemed to be logical. I think where I have a couple things that, and I was involved with crafting some of this early on. Work got in the way of me attending any of the meetings, but I did kind of screen a lot of this. But on 8A, the issue has come up a couple times with the +2. I mean, I personally, I'm probably opposed to the +2 because I think what happens there is it creates a situation where you get into that gray area about enforcement. Based on all the regulations, you can lock in 2 people per bedroom. 4 bedrooms, you got 8 people. You start getting into that +2, it creates issues not only for enforcement, but also for potentially parking and other things like that. So I'm kind of, I'd be opposed to the +2. I think it creates a gray area where in most cases, it's the problem situations that's where that +2 will come into play. If you're in a situation where if there are no problems and there are no reports, you know, then you're doing the right thing. It's really the issues where people are pushing the limit and you're getting that +2 every night in a rental. That's where it's going to probably become a problem. So I just would like to avoid that gray area right from the get-go. The only other one that kind of I question a little bit, and maybe we need to think a little bit about, is the parking. It was brought up by one of the folks tonight about if you can't provide enough parking, then all of a sudden you lose a bedroom. Hadn't really thought about that, but part of the occupancy issue and the number of bedrooms is making sure you have adequate parking, because if you don't have adequate parking, people are parking in the street, parking illegally, that does create a safety issue. So I think we need to think a little bit about how we address the parking issue. But I think parking is a big component of this, because if you're renting out 3 or 4 bedrooms and they're all couples and you get 3 or 4 cars, in some places in Portsmouth, that's not a problem. In compact areas, Common Fence Point, Island Park, most of those lots don't even have driveways. I spent a number of years on the zoning board. It was always an issue where somebody came in and maxed out their parking lot, maxed out their lot to build a house. There was no place for parking. So you took 2 spots in front of that house. If you have a 4-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom house, in most places in Common Fence Point or Island Park, I bet you don't have 4 parking spaces total. So that's something I think we need to think about a little bit, is the parking issue. Those are probably my 3 comments.
Anybody else? Mr. Ryan?
On the business of the +2, I think.
Sorry, thank you.
On the business of the +2, I mean, and that does tie in with the age at which one becomes a person. I think 12 makes sense. We're not thinking that people are going to be bringing their 12-year-olds who will be driving down here and drinking. So presumably they'll come with the rest of the family, so they don't add additional cars. So I think changing the age from 6 to 12 makes sense. I don't know if I'd want 2 12-year-olds sleeping in a bedroom with me, but you know, other individuals may decide differently.
And to me, it also gets to that point at which, where do you feel comfortable leaving your child home alone when you go on a vacation?
Right. So I think that does make sense.
12 is kind of that eerie cutoff.
You were driving at 12?
Just tractors.
But you can't do it legally, Paul. You can't do it legally.
You don't need a license till you get caught. Right, Chief?
He's not going to condone that kind of behavior. I hope he's not going to condone
I know that.
Mr. Kessler?
So, I guess I really have trouble with the with the 8A. I'd like to see that go away. I'd like to see the parking stick at where it is. But
You want all of 8A to go away?
I
Or
want
just a
the
piece
two,
of it?
the 2 extra people.
Okay.
And I'd like to see it go to 12. I've been renting in a place in Maine, because we used to go see the Bears at the dump. There's a lot of people that bring nephews and everything else, so, you know, we've always been over the capacity of my camp in Maine if I look back. But being a family camp, I think it makes a big difference. My problem with the ordinance is I think it needs to be, to address something somebody hasn't addressed already, is I think the ordinance needs to be, whenever we decide to do it, it has to be an immediate effect, in effect, and a grace period. And that hasn't been addressed by any of the councils yet. And the reason it needs to be in effect is as these renters go forward, the rules that we're going to change, you guys that are renting need to abide by them. You need to know what they are. And it scares me that we're already into April next year, possibly on renters, on families that come back, and I don't know that because I haven't seen the data. And basically, I'm pretty much data-driven. So I think that the ordinance, even though it says December as an effective date, I would like to see that be the exclusion date, and effective almost immediately upon passage by the council, with the exclusion date up until December 31st, 2018.
Well, the Section 13 implementation is, this ordinance shall take effect upon passage, provided, however, the enforcement of violations shall be stayed until December 31st, 2018.
Correct, but again, I think the enforcement should start as of the date it passes, with the exemption being written the other way, Mr. President. It's a little bit of left-hand thought. But that way everybody knows that they have to change their rental agreements immediately, if not sooner, upon the passage of the ordinance. The second thing I'd like to ask, and this is the police chief and most of all the fire chief, is if we give, like other towns give an occupancy permit for this to happen. This is which is another hard spot I have, but we're now into a business in a residential area, and the effective zoning is everywhere in town. Correct, Mr. Crosby? So I have a real hard spot with that, because it's like agriculture is everywhere and nothing else is anywhere. And so I don't know if this ordinance addresses that enough, because everybody's piece of property is an investment. And putting a business next to, or allowing a business right next door, 30 feet, 15 feet, an arm's length on what I popularly call the lollipop out on Island Park and Riverside Avenue. There's unintended consequences when we do that. And the one that bothers me the most is when we have to call into 911. We've got an occupancy permit. Fire chief or fire marshal goes down, says the house is safe. But we have 4 to 5 houses burned after we've approved an ordinance that says that they can do it. But we have 4 houses that burn instead of 3, like just happened in Common Fence Point. Now, we've known for over a month where most of these Airbnbs are. We have documentation that was given to the council. Has the fire chief looked at those? Have we ever gone into houses and put an occupancy permit that says this house?
Not in a single family, or 1 or 2 or 3, even 3 family.
So again, I get real scared when we do that, only because sitting on the council, I'm wondering if the town is open to a liability if we offer an occupancy permit. I mean, I've looked at the, I tried to look at the fire code, and there's a tremendous amount of Chapter 8 seems like it applies. Chapter 24, Chapter 28 and 29 also seems that it applies, so does 26. So I'm not against the ordinance. What I want to understand is the unintended consequences when we implement this. And I'd like to have the fire chief, at least before I vote on it, go back over the lists that were submitted and to make sure we cover our butts, that we don't issue occupancy permits where we put neighbors and residents 5 feet away.
The fire department's not issuing any occupancy permit.
Well, then who would issue the occupancy permit for this business to run in a residence?
It's just a registration.
If there is no,
So I guess my question is then, are we, in these high-density areas where we're on top of one another, we can't get 3 cars in front of a house, are we taking away the safety in a neighborhood because we're allowing a business to run?
I mean, and I think that's been the crux of both sides tonight and what's driving this throughout the entire country. But the fact of the matter is, state law says that we can't prohibit this. So, and the state...
So do we open ourselves to a lawsuit?
Well, the state does not look at this as a business. We understand what it is, but it's a short-term rental, and the state has sided with the homeowners.
I think I've had like 6 people tell me it's a business. One gentleman has...
I can only tell you what the state says. The state says that it's not a business. It is a short-term rental, and we are prohibited from... We cannot prohibit it.
Well, I don't think we want to prohibit it.
So, but there are no certificate of occupancies associated with this. However, what we try to address in this ordinance is, going in, we look at the septic systems, the number of bedrooms, make sure the house is up to code, make sure that there's carbon monoxide detectors, fire detectors.
So we're certifying something without giving official piece of paper? Is that what we're doing?
There's no, it would be the registration, but there is no official piece of paper because it's not a hotel. I get it. I mean, this is what the working group
I know,
has been
and I'm worried about, it's not that I'm against this ordinance. I don't want to shut down Airbnbs, but there's, in Island Park, you can reach out and touch the house next door.
The fire code does not give us the authority to go into a single-family, 1, 2, or 3-family home and conduct an inspection other than a smoke detector and carbon monoxide inspection.
So are we going to do that, Mr. Rayner, as part of this?
Yes, it's written in the ordinance, yes.
Okay. All righty.
I had a question for Chief Lee. As far as posting information on the house, is that necessary for public safety? If these people, these places are registered, does there need to be identification papers on the outside of the house?
That was copied by other communities that had that. Is it absolutely necessary? We could obviously function without that there. That was for problem houses that have occurred in other communities. And I think I know it's in middle towns.
It's definitely
in some other communities.
It's in Westerly, too.
Yeah, because of some problems.
Would it make if an officer is called to the scene, would it make his or her job that much simpler to have this information plastered at the outside of the house where they need it?
I mean, it could make it easier, but obviously we could have it internally, like we do with alarm codes, where it's written into the address, premise history, just internally when we're responding, you'd know it. It makes it easier when you're dealing with a busy night and you might not get that information from the dispatcher.
May I add to that conversation? I just mentioned it to the chief tonight. A question was whether the police have keys to the Knox box that we put on schools, the fire department has access to, whether one way we could deal with information that would be, important to a police officer showing up because of a complaint of noise would be they'd have a key to a Knox box which would have the owner's information. without having to enter the property would be a possible solution for not having to post. You know, I hear people have complained, that's one of the big complaints that people have said, we don't want our name on the house. That would be an alternative solution as well.
Yeah, and we heard that. First of all, I'd like to thank the other members of the committee that did a lot of work on this. I was on the committee with them. They did a lot of work. A lot of thought went into it. I don't think we were looking to penalize people who rent their property through these services, HomeAway or Airbnb. That was never the intention. And I understand the privacy concerns, and I thought it was just going to be like a contact number. I didn't think it was going to be someone's personal information. We wouldn't want that out in general. I thought it was a contact number was going to be on the property, and not the rest of it. But can we live without that? Obviously. We were hoping there to be some reasonable regulations to put into effect. We're not looking to shut this down. One of my friends has a property. He sent me a copy of the book, I guess, How to Get Paid for Your Pad. I don't even know. I didn't get a chance to read the thing. I am not against this. I don't know why people think that I'm against it. We're not, you know, and the people on the committee weren't against it. It was just reasonable regulations. And student housing is different from what we're having here. We have a lot of problems with student housing. We don't have a lot of problems traditionally with the rentals. There's been a couple of complaints, maybe 3 addresses, I think. You mentioned earlier, Keith. I think there's only been 3 that we've had calls on.
It seems to me the majority of the people who are doing these things are doing it the proper way. But as with any ordinance, you know, we don't need a police car at the end of a street because people aren't speeding. It's when people start speeding down a street like Atlantic Avenue and they're going over the 15 miles an hour that we need somebody to go out there and say, hey, stop or slow down. So that's where we're at tonight, is people are speeding and we need to slow them down. Thank you, Chief. Mr. Kessler?
I have one more. The 30-day rental, I would really like to see to include the college rentals to address the original petitioner, and I would like to see, I think, 9 months be added from 31 days to 9 months. That's it, Mr. President.
Okay. Mr. Gleason?
I would agree with that as well. Some of my other comments here, I didn't hear any complaints at all about the Section 11. I don't know if Larry covered that or not. He did have a paragraph. But I think it's important, you know, whether we decide to put something on the outside of the property to, you know, so there'll be access to the owner, to be contacted, that information should be posted, Section 10 as well, that shows, you know, what our ordinances are, our dog leash laws, et cetera, and pointing out for anybody that would be renting in town. And the only thing that's missing on here is speed limits. I think it should be blatantly posted what the speed limit is on that street that you're renting from.
But that information is posted inside the house.
Inside the house, right. And there wasn't any complaints about doing that, which surprised me, but I think that's important that those facts are in there and listed. The 12 years old, I would agree to raise that. The registration fee, which appears to be a yearly thing, I think $100 is sufficient. I don't think we need to do that per bedroom. I've heard that repeated here as well. Not everybody's going to be pleased with this ordinance, but I think it is time that we do something. I think it's important. We can come to some kind of agreement. The new and proposed occupancy limits that were presented tonight, I think is better than what's in here, the new submission. Thank you.
Mrs. Phillips, I'm looking at the two of you because neither one of you said anything yet, so.
I'm still writing.
Still writing.
Actually, I had a couple questions for
Sure.
Mr. Rayner. I just wanted to double check some numbers. You said that we've estimated how much of the tax money we were getting from the state, and you said something like around $10,000, was that right?
10,500.
1% is of what's collected is
the state acts as a pass-through. We get 1% back. The data from last year, we received about $5,400 from hosting platforms and hotel resellers, and about $5,100 from realtors and homeowners who rent an entire house. Obviously, they've registered in some way. So it's about, a little over $10,000.
That we get, so that would mean there's about $1 million worth of money, that, I mean, 10,000 is 1%, is that we get? So the amount of business that's actually being transpiring is probably around $1 million?
No, it's well, I'd have to look at it. I don't know if Matt is still here. Yeah, so it's probably, but it's, all the hotel is we're just taking a percentage, so it's about $1 million, but, it's not all Airbnb, obviously. So it's Airbnb, the short-term rentals is only about, we only get 1% back, so that's what this number is referring to. But the point I want to stress, though, is that if, in a perfect world, everybody's being honest and they're registering their Airbnbs. I suspect that we're probably going to scoop up some people that have not done that. I don't know how much of a delta there's going to be, so I don't think enacting this ordinance is going to create a revenue stream for Portsmouth. We already have the revenue stream. One of the things we need, one of the reasons that we put in the $100 per bedroom is because one of the things that we're proposing is that we hire some kind of compliance firm. We're trying to create a revenue stream that will pay for that compliance firm.
Right. No, I was just trying to get an idea of the scope of the amount of business, this kind of business that's happening in Portsmouth. And if we're getting 1% and it's $10,000, does that not say?
Yeah, I see your point.
I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to speak. At this moment, I think as my first example, when I showed Airbnb's map, of course, it's all the city view. As host compliance will tell you 20 to 25% compliance without the technology.
Right, but I guess I'm just going to the more fundamental question of what is the scope of this? Because people are saying, it's not that big a deal, frankly. And I guess what really worries me is that the other two communities on this island have been dealing with this, and that I think there has been like a tenfold increase in the amount of Airbnbs that are cropping up. And as our real estate person has said, it's becoming much more and more personal, profitable, a business opportunity. People see it as such. And so that concerns me for a couple of reasons. One, at a more macro level, what this is doing, and I think it was summed up by, I was reading what happened in Newport. One of the real estate agents there, who's actually a council person, said, if a home goes on the market in Newport, it's for sale for less than $450,000 and it's in fair shape. She said, she'll get 19 calls on the first day, and then 4 offers after that, and none of whom are people who plan to live in the house. So, this is something that is going to really drive up the cost of affordable housing in this town, because people who want to, like, one of the biggest problems that seniors have is that they would like to age at home. And it becomes much more difficult if the cost of housing is being driven up by people who are using houses, residential houses, as a business opportunity. So that's a major concern of mine, because I believe seniors should be able to age in home. I believe their children and grandchildren should also be able to stay where they grew up if they want to and find affordable housing. So are we giving up that opportunity for our residents in order to benefit businesses, especially businesses owned by people who don't live in our community? I feel that we're always balancing things, but as between helping our citizens who want to have affordable housing versus helping out-of-state business people make a lot of money, I obviously would prefer to help the people who live in this town. So I do feel that we have to have this kind of ordinance to try to control this growth, because I don't believe what Mr. Harris was saying, which is that we should just politely make suggestions, he has a lot more faith in people than I do about following suggestions. And it's not that we want to punish people who are law-abiding folks who would just like to make some extra money, who are residents. That is not something we want to stop. Again, it's kind of giving up the rights to have a good quality of life, as well as the health and safety issues that we've been discussing, giving all of that up in order to benefit some folks who are mainly interested in not living in our community and making a profit. I just think that that balance should tip towards safety, health, safety, and quality of life. So I do believe that this ordinance is fairly reasonable. I will say that I don't think, I'd like to talk privately, I guess, to our attorney, because we don't want to let all our legal positions become public, because that would hurt the town. But I would like to know if we can exclude Prudence Island legally, because I don't believe, I mean, this is just without understanding what the law is. It seems that it's a community that isn't the same as the rest of the mainland. And I say that even the real strong proponents of this ordinance are willing to let Prudence Island continue exempted. So I believe I would support that if there is a legal thing to do, and I don't hear anything contrary. Secondly, as far as the price that we're charging people, I understand that people feel it's a really high amount. I go along with Rich saying that it has to be, if we are going to have this, we do need to have enforcement costs covered. And I am a proponent of having a progressive system, so that the person with the $500,000 house isn't paying the same as the guy who has the $2.5 million house. So it is nice not to have everyone paying exactly the same price, because, and the bedrooms were one way to instill a progressive fee by just charging wealthier people more, or people with bigger houses more, presumably because they also make more money from having more bedrooms. I guess the only other, so in general, just to summarize, I do support this ordinance generally. I do support maybe looking into making sure that the legal questions that were raised here are not putting us in jeopardy. So that would be something I'd suggest we have an executive committee, session 4, to discuss the issues with our attorney. And then as far as the, let's see, what else was there? Sorry. The 9-month thing, I understand that the big concern is the partying of college students, but I think that at this moment, since we haven't really given people notice that we're going to be talking about the 9-month renters, or the longer-term renters, it seems like it would be unfair to just suddenly change this ordinance with that time requirement, because it is significantly different. It's moving us from short-term rentals to long-term rentals, and I just don't feel like the public has had enough notice to consider this ordinance. So I guess I'd be in favor of certainly considering it down the road, but not as part of this this ordinance. And what else was there? Sorry. Okay, that's all.
As far as your question about exempting certain sections of town, Mr. Gavin, are you aware of any other cities that have exempted sections of towns, or can you do some research and get back to us on that?
Well, I mean, the ordinances are all over the lot, depending on the particular community.
Right.
I mean, in Portsmouth, we have all residential property is designated residential, it's zone residential in R20, whether it's in Portsmouth or whether it's here. Yeah, on mainland, but I mean, I think certainly one could argue that there's valid, rational reasons that Prudence and Hog Island have different issues than on the mainland in Portsmouth. So if the council chose to do that exemption, and you know, no one can guarantee if someone says that's not fair, that I'm being treated differently, but I think if the council chooses to do that as a matter of policy, that's the council's call. And if someone cries foul at some point in the future, you know, we defend the town's positions and the town's policy decisions. But it comes down to whether there's a reasonable, rational basis to make that distinction.
Okay. Are you finished writing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
I agree with my colleagues about a lot of things, so I'm going to focus on those first. I'm also completely against putting a sign on the house. I mean, that's a huge invasion of privacy. Hotels can't even do it. I mean, they can't even give out like who their people are in the hotel. And, you know, I'm concerned about battered women, people that are being stalked, you know, I mean, that's just, we can't do that. Let's see, the 7-year-olds, it should be 12. I mean, I wouldn't even leave a 14-year-old kid at home, to tell you the truth. But yeah, I would be in favor of changing the 7-year-old to the 12-year-old. Prudence Island, you know, I was reading a case law thing about short-term rentals, and they have several things that they look at to see if people are being discriminated against, and that's one of the things that it talks about, you know, having one part of the town exempt, and Prudence Island is part of the town. So I don't know if that's going to fly. What else? The 14-day IRS thing. If the IRS gives people 14 days to rent their house for free without taking taxes, I think that we need something in this ordinance that's similar. Let's see, what else? You know, a lot of people were talking about businesses in a residential area. You know, any house is a business in a residential area if you rent it, no matter if you rent it for a day or 2 years. It's still a business. A lot of people invest in homes and rent them. You know, people who rent, you know, just because you're a short-term renter doesn't mean that you have to be a bad neighbor. I think that for the people that said there are a few bad eggs, there are a few bad eggs, and I don't like to punish like everyone for the few bad eggs. You can be a good neighbor and just be there for a weekend. I think that, you know, that way we need to address the disruption issue, because there are existing laws for this. We want to be more attentive to what is considered disturbing the peace, for example. I would be in favor of strengthening those laws about disturbing the peace and fining rather than, for instance, charging people. I don't want to charge people per bedroom either. I think the $100 a year is better. The bigger houses, they already pay more in taxes. And by the way, they employ vendors, they have house cleaners, they, you know, have landscapers, they have pool maintenance people, they have, you know, a lot of things. And by the way, when you rent from Airbnb, it's not 1% that gets taken out of your rent, it's 9%, and 9% goes up to the state. We may only get 1%, but they take 9%. So these people are paying 9% to Airbnb. They're already paying income taxes as well. They're paying property taxes. The bigger houses are paying more property taxes. And they don't have kids in school. So that's another issue. The parking, all right. So like my colleague, Mr. Aguiar, I hadn't thought about that because I had thought originally that if, you know, if we limit the parking, that would sort of enforce itself, but I never considered that, suppose you have 3 or 4 bedrooms and you're only allowed 2 parking spaces. So I don't know what we're going to do about that. That needs to go back to the drawing board. Let's see. Oh, you know, about the fires in homes and that, you know, there could be a fire in any home, any home, and which, you know, did happen in Common Fence Point, and it was terrible. So I don't know how how that's different for short-term rentals. I like what Jan Hanks suggested, that before we make any decisions tonight, perhaps we should go back to the drawing board. I'm a little bit, I'm disappointed that Ms. Panaggio brought this up last year, and that we had a whole year to craft something, but now we're trying to like rush something through at the last minute. I mean, this just came up, you know, last month, and they had a working group, but I don't think there were enough of the renters on the working group. I think there are a lot of good, responsible people that do this. I would also agree with my colleague about the 9 months. I wouldn't want to change that right now, because this hearing was about a short-term rental ordinance. People weren't thinking that, you know, that we were going to expand it to 9 months. That's, you know, becomes not short-term anymore. And I guess my biggest concern with this whole thing, though, is how are you going to enforce this? How are you going to, like, okay, so 8A, you know, there's 2 people per bedroom. Okay, what are the police going to do? Come in the middle of the night and knock on the door and count people in bedrooms?
No.
They'll usually be outside.
There only becomes an issue when they're disturbing the peace. I mean,
Okay, well-
let's be honest. That's where it's going to happen, right? If a house next door to you gets rented out by, I don't know, a 3-bedroom house gets rented out by 10 people, but they're not disturbing you, you're not going to call, so nobody's going to know.
Well, you know,
But when you figure in the compliance factor of what we have listed in a 3-bedroom house that's being rented out as a
so
6-bedroom.
basically what you're saying is it's like all the other ordinances, is sometimes we're going to enforce it and sometimes we're not. You know, and that's what got us here to begin with, was that, you know, as Ms. Panaggio said, she called several times. Nothing was done. We already have noise ordinances. We already have litter ordinances. We already have, you know, you name it. We have the septic system. We have a wastewater management district. So, you know, I would like to, rather than trying to rush something through tonight, I would rather see us take these comments, go back to the drawing board. We've already had a year. I know it's late, but, you know, again, another 2 weeks is not going to matter. Too much.
All set?
I think so. I have a lot of notes here.
There's more time. Mr. Kessin?
The only reason I brought up this 9-month is the original petitioner has dealt with college rentals, and this ordinance doesn't address the original complaints from the petitioner. Again, I understand and I don't have to ask Mr. Rayner, we started with a Middletown ordinance.
We started with a number of other ordinances from Rhode Island, but Middletown served as kind of the skeleton, yes.
Yeah, so Middletown's ordinance already had 30 days in it. So I was wondering how we got from a 9-month ordinance down to a 31-day. Could you educate me how that happened?
I just interject, because almost everywhere, short-term rentals are defined as 30 days or less, 31 days or less. And I think the administration was tasked with coming up with a short-term rental.
Okay, so I mean, again, we had the skeleton of Middletowns, and I know it had a 30-day rental in it, that's what I thought we used. I just think that we're not going to help one of the petitioners, and I think that's why we were here, to resolve to address the problems that were brought forward from the original petitioner. And it's just, if we're not going to look at this 9 months, and I don't think it takes another ordinance or another meeting, we have the ability to change this. To not address it, I think it's going to have unintended consequences, and
Well,
it'll either go away or it won't.
I'll
Thank you,
answer
Mr.
that this way.
President.
We can't set laws and ordinances in town for a person. Sorry, Mr. Panaggio. We have to do what's best for the greater good of the town of Portsmouth. We can't enact a 9-month ordinance that we haven't advertised and affect an enormous amount of people because we all feel for Ms. Panaggio. If we're going to go to a 9-month thing, I would agree with Ms. Ujifusa and Ms. Pedro that we would go back out and advertise that part. I think there are things that we all agree on here that we can make changes to the ordinance as it's listed now to include, removal of the posting on the outside of the house, upping the age to 12 years. Those are minor changes that were already listed that we can make changes to. If we want to look at doing the fees, we can change the fee structures as well. But making a big jump to a 9-month from a 31-day I don't think is proper tonight. Mr. Gavin.
And as far as the issue of the parking, I mean, if it got kicked back to the group, we'd need direction as to how you want to do that. You could either this includes parking as a restriction on maximum occupancy. You could do away with that if you want and just make it bedrooms. Or that's what this language now.
It's clearly, I mean, what we're trying to address in this ordinance was one of the primary complaints was Island Park, Common Fence Point, where there's no parking. And we heard tonight a number of residents talk about you have people parking on yards, people parking on the wrong side of the street. So we realized that anybody who rents is going to need a place to park, but we wanted to keep it reasonable. One of the very first nights we discussed this, we heard about a house that had 28 cars in front of it. So we're trying to use that as just another metric to make or to maintain the quality of life for the residents that have to live near these Airbnbs. And if we take the parking out, we're right back to square one in Island Park.
Sure.
Mr. Rainer, I agree with the parking, and I've been trying to figure out a way to, how do we try to resolve it? The issue about the +1, I think we could delete the bedrooms +1 on the parking. The issue becomes public streets. I mean, cars can park on a public street, so it becomes a free-for-all for parking on the street. That's really what that's the unintended consequence here, is that you could have 2 or 3 cars all jockeying for position, and they're going to park wherever there's a space. So we can't stop somebody. You can't put up signs that say, no parking, or parking for this street, for this house only. We don't have that authority.
Then that's not what this does. It just makes parking.
Yeah. So I think the parking is something that probably has to be looked at a little bit different.
It just doesn't prevent parking. Anyone can park anywhere they want. The amount of parking available just potentially limits the maximum.
We're just looking at, we're not restricting the parking.
Right.
But the amount of parking available can restrict the occupancy of the home.
Right, but I think
short-term rental.
The way I was reading it, we were saying the parking was, you got to provide parking for 1 per bedroom plus an extra. So I think we were requiring,
It's not requiring it be at that location. You can't stop someone from parking. If it's legal parking, they park in front of someone down the street.
Right, but I would say it'd be easier if we eliminated the 1 per bedroom plus 1. Keep it just at 1 per bedroom.
Eliminate the parking fee too if you want. It's a policy decision.
I was just trying to, in my own head, wrestle with it because I mean, that's a separate issue for zoning as well. I mean, there's plenty of places that don't have enough parking.
Yes.
I just want to make a comment about the enforcement and our police responding to and enforcing our own laws. I believe that, talking to Chief Lee, that his officers have always responded to the complaints, and that I don't want an image to be conveyed that Portsmouth doesn't enforce its ordinances.
Thank you, Council. We did respond. We responded to the call. Not everyone's happy with the result, but we do respond.
Absolutely, thank you.
All right. Let's take this from the top. Again, there are certain things that we are all agreeable to. So we'll start with, well, maybe we're not all agreeable to, but well, we can start with number 7, the registration fee, and whether or not we want to make that a flat rate or a per bedroom rate. Again, I'm happier going with a lower registration rate and higher fines. I just looked at the San Francisco ordinance is $250, and Middletown is 100. No, Middletown went down to 10, right?
10 per bedroom.
10 per bedroom? Thank you, Chris. So a 4-bedroom house is $40. Well, again, it's one of the, we're in a catch-22 here. We can try and raise enough money. What is the cost for a yearly contract with one of these overseers?
We would have to RFP it, and it'll depend on the amount of business they anticipate they'll get from the region.
Right. So we're kind of shooting in the dark, whether it's $50, $100, and we would want to be putting this money into a restricted account. It's not, unlike comments that I have seen online, this is not a money grab for the town. It is something that we're looking to pay for itself in order to keep our residents safe and happy. But we don't know what that number is.
No, I mean, it's obviously quite frankly, I have to thank Mr. Moore. He put a lot of work into this, and we were using his numbers.
So is there stuff that people are agreeable to? I mean, the +2 is a little bit vague to me, but if I'm spending $5,000 to rent a house for a weekend and a couple of friends happen to show up extra and they sleep on the couch, as long as they're not causing, again, if they're not causing a ruckus, nobody's going to know. That's where it comes into play.
Well, if you read the white paper prepared by Host Compliance, they say that the key to making any ordinance is its simplicity and its clarity. And I guess I would opt to go with the suggestion provided by Mr. Moore initially, to keep its clarity and simplicity in place.
Was that in the form of a motion to change it and just strike out the...
To strike out,
okay.
yes.
This is where I'm trying to get to, so we can,
Sorry, I
not be
make
here
a
till
motion that we
midnight.
strike the 2 additional guests.
Okay. So you would like to strike not more than 2 persons per bedroom, plus 2 additional persons, maybe present at short-term rental between
Just
the hours of 10 and 7.
Right, the last sentence.
Okay. Is there a second for that? Any further discussion? Mr. Gleason?
Yes, so basically we're saying that you can have extra guests, what you're proposing.
Cannot.
Can or cannot?
I'm saying that the number of people that we're allowing be set forth in the first sentence and not potentially contradicted by the last sentence in that paragraph.
Okay.
Everybody is okay with that? Any further discussion? This is baby steps. We're doing one little piece at a time.
Let's do it.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Sentence before that. For the purpose of establishing occupancy, a person shall be defined as an individual of at least 6 years of age. Can I have a motion to change that to 12?
Motion to change that to 12.
Second.
Any discussion from the council? All those in favor?
Can I just say that, again, it's all about simplicity and enforceability, and it's easier to identify a 6-year-old than it is a 12-year-old from a 16-year-old or whatever, and I believe that the number is 6 years of age in the Middletown statute for that reason, that it's just easier to enforce, and it's a clearer standard.
I just don't think we're looking at families coming down with a 12-year-old who are going to be a party house.
So I guess the question, no, it's not a party house, it's just a question of how many basically adults you're allowing in a house. And, you know, I understand that everybody would like to have their 3-year-old have a free seat on an airplane, but they make a cutoff at a certain point so you don't get the free seat. So I'm just a little bit afraid of that. And so I would probably oppose raising it from 6 to 12.
Okay. Again, I go back to the vision of a grandparents renting a house, having a couple kids down, and nope, Johnny, you can't come because you're 7 years old, you have to stay home.
No, we have to pay for Johnny because he's essentially an adult.
No, you're not paying for him. He can't come because you're one over the limit.
No,
It's
you
not-
would
it's
rent
not,
a
oh.
house for a larger number of people, not get him in for free. I
Okay.
believe that would be the...
All right, motion is to raise to 12. All those in favor? Yeah. Motion was made by Ms. Pedro and seconded by Mr. Kessin.
Correct.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 6 to 1. Where else did we have some commonality? You want to go back up to the registration fee? Mr. Gleason, go ahead.
Sure. I would make a motion that we keep the registration fee at $100 per rental unit, property.
As opposed to bedroom in
Right.
rental unit. So
As
just a
opposed-
$100 flat fee per rental unit. Okay? Is there a second for discussion?
Second.
I would,
Go ahead.
my concern is that we would, first of all, understand whether we can cover the cost of enforcement, and it seems a little bit arbitrary to pick $100 per house at this point, and so perhaps we could table this until more research is done to give us a better number. Because I believe host compliance does do kind of an initial free estimate type of work, and maybe they would be able to help us figure out how many people we're really talking about in town, and, you know, pick a price point and pick an amount that we can understand that we're actually going to cover before we just pick $100 randomly tonight.
My only kind of concern with that is they're going to pick a number that they like. I mean, we have to going to put this out to bid anyways, but they're going to say, well, it's going to cost you, town of Portsmouth is going to cost you about $10,000, and then we're going to have to make our number fit theirs. Why don't we put our number in, and they have to fit to us?
They won't do that.
Okay,
That's
then-
like thinking that if you offer a car dealership a certain price, they're just going to accept your price. I mean, people have to charge what they charge, and actually Host Compliance has on its website exactly their prices depending on how many people you might have. You know, they have their numbers set for specific amounts of people covered.
Gee, I guess we're going with host compliance.
I'm just saying that that is a company that is a leader in this area, and it's worth looking at what they have to say. And they certainly have done a lot of research.
We have to go out to bid first.
Absolutely, absolutely, but it doesn't mean that
So
we
it's gotta
don't look
take-
at what's out there.
It's going to take a long
I'm
time.
going to be more altruistic, and I'm going to look at this as a bigger picture, that once we put this ordinance into place, that people will get into line. Because, again, we're only talking about, of the 50, 60, 100 properties in Portsmouth, we're talking about a handful.
Okay, well, hope is not a plan, but nonetheless, we should also be considering my concern that the guy that has the $2.5 million house and is making $2,500 a night should be paying more than the poor guy that's paying, you know, just renting it one room.
He does pay more.
How does $100 per house mean that someone is paying
He pays
more?
a lot more in taxes.
Those taxes are separate from this issue. We've already decided that it's a fee that we're charging to make this thing happen. And to keep bringing in taxes as a reason not to set reasonable fees for this specific item does not make sense.
Well, if we have 100 properties at $100 apiece, to me, that's 10 grand If they're gonna charge us more than 10 grand to do it, then we'll have to figure out different ways.
I just, if we knew that, if we knew the numbers were from host compliant, we knew what those numbers were, I would have gladly seen that in the backup. I'm ready to vote on this motion, Mr. Kessler, Mr. President.
You're Mr. Kessler.
Yeah, I know.
It's getting late.
It's getting late.
All right, the motion is to set it as to $100 per unit, per rental unit. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-2. We have not done signs on the house yet. You did do signs?
No, we didn't do
did not.
signs.
No external notifications on properties. Again, I believe that we can handle this, as Chief said, we can have, I mean, I go spreadsheets, but a spreadsheet, you know, when a call comes in, the desk officer can quickly look up and say, yep, 56 Smith Avenue is listed as a rental property. So the officers responding know what they're getting into when they get there. It doesn't seem like an overreach for that, and it seems a lot safer than somebody having their phone number out front that anybody can call. Is it 11D?
Motion would be to delete 11B.
And, all right, we'll start with 10. Where is it in 10?
10's on the
Posting of notice of owner.
10's on the inside.
No, it's
Inside.
on the inside.
That's in plain view. That's inside. That's like me reading this every meeting. That's now posted on my desk. I have to read this every meeting. We have to have local representation. I agree with that. Record of owner shall, yeah. B and
Short term.
C, contact information of record of owner and local representative shall be mailed now. B and C.
You know, if you're posting the names of all the people inside anyway, then the police could ask for that if they have to.
Right.
They come to the door.
And mailing information to everybody within 200 feet in Island Park you would be mailing information to everybody in Island Park, roughly.
Not quite, but
It's pretty close. Again, I'll go back to, even though hope is not a plan, I've been told, I would hope that neighbors would actually just talk to each other, but obviously we have some issues with that. But I think B and C, me personally, could go.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to delete paragraphs 11B and C in their entirety.
Second.
And then that would relabel paragraph D to paragraph B.
Sure.
For, you know, okay. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. I didn't hear a solid aye out of you there. Just waiting, okay. Mr. Gavin, I'm just not reading it specifically, and I just want to make sure it's in there that if a rental property does not register by the 31st, I could be skipping over it, but it's in there, right? So if they don't register by the 31st on January 1st, technically they're in violation of this.
Yeah,
And if they rent their
violation of
house, so they would have to actually rent their house though, right? So if I had an Airbnb this year and I stopped doing it on January 1st, but I registered this year,
Technically, you're supposed to renew it every year, and that would be a violation. If post-compliance or other company like that were hired, and they found someone's advertising and renting out their property.
but you would have to advertise and rent it. If I just decided that, if I'll go back to, she left.
Right.
Her investment owner, Ms. Donovan's investment owner, has bought a house, or is buying a house tomorrow in Island Park for a long-term investment, and they're going to come down here and move once their kids are grown and off into college. They're renting it now, they decide to stop renting it, they don't have to re-register it, we're not going to go out there and penalize them January 1st.
Only if they're doing
Just,
short-term rental.
just to make sure, okay. The 100, 250, and 500, that was out of Middletown as well?
No,
Or you guys came up with that yourselves?
oh, I don't know if it was in Middletown. We had a lower amount, and then it was suggested.
We decided
increase
that
it.
we would
Okay.
put in a graduated, a ramped-up fee schedule.
That one works for me. We have a stay until the end of the year so that people can get used to these things and inform returning customers of the new ordinances.
That's the intent of paragraph 13.
Right. Is there anything else in there that council members see or want to have, or want in there? Let's either. I would rather, I think that's a sticky wicket, honestly, of, if I'm a property owner here, we don't charge different taxes in Prudence than we do here in Portsmouth. We don't, I think that's a sticky line to cross for me.
But the major concern about this, the reason this ordinance came up is because you have residential residences next door to what are essentially businesses. And if you look at Prudence, they've had decades, if not generations, of people who are all doing these short-term rentals in a concentrated area, and there isn't this problem of having a business right next door to a residence who's never seen it before. They've had it happening all the time. That's my understanding. And you can zone differently for a business section than you do a residential section, and I sort of view them as basically a short-term rental business section. And again, they don't go towards my other fundamental concern, which is that you're just letting out-of-towners come in and make it a big business opportunity. These are folks that do this to make a living and only do it for sometimes 5 weeks of the year. Isn't that right? So I would say that it should be something we consider. I'm not sure who would oppose doing it. That's the other thing, unless it's simply illegal. So I would say we pass it contingent on it not passing legal muster.
I would make this argument. There are generations of people who have owned houses in Island Park and Common Fence Point that
But
rent
they're
them out.
all not in a concentrated area like Prudence Island.
But it's still, I could come in and make the argument that I've had a rental house in Island Park for 30 years that I rent out to college students during the winter and use as my summer home in the summertime.
Fair enough. I retract the generations argument, but I do go back towards the idea that you're looking at an area where there aren't abutters with conflicting interests.
Oh, I would disagree. There's some Hatfields and McCoys over there.
Well, I'm talking
Right,
about
Fred?
short-term rental concerns, but, all right.
Yeah, no, I just,
I hear you.
let me put it to you this way. Prudence Island has always wanted to be treated just like us.
That's right.
And now they're asking us not to be treated just like
They do, that's right. That was my first thought about that.
But
I have something else
Sure.
about that. That's why I want, because this is the thing about this ordinance that really bothers me, is that you're punishing all the people, and we've heard several of them, whether they're on Prudence Island or whether they're here, that have family homes that just want to offset their taxes and they want to rent it out. And the guy that came up and said, the 14-day IRS rule, I already knew about that rule, and that's why I want to see a provision in this ordinance that if you're doing this for 14 days or under, then this ordinance does not apply to you.
That would defeat the whole purpose of your ordinance.
Yeah, that would defeat the whole purpose. of the
14 days or under out of the year. Out of the year. This like gets rid of all the people who are doing this week after week after week. If you do this for 14, if you're doing this for less than 14 days per year, then you shouldn't have to.
I think $100 is not going to scare somebody away from. You could rent a house for Jazz Festival Jazz Festival and Folk Festival weekend, and make a pretty good chunk of change to cover the $100.
Yeah. Right.
It's not $100 a bedroom anymore, it's just $100, flat fee.
That's an ordinance, it has to be broad enough that it applies to everyone. You can't
Well, then I don't know about this Prudence Island thing. I would rather see a provision for people that are only doing it a couple of weekends a year.
I find it, again, cover your ears, chief, but people in Prudence are only gonna, there's only gonna be an issue in Prudence if people are calling on their neighbors.
But if I may, Mr. President, if we hire a host compliance kind of firm, they're going to scoop up information from the internet, from social media, from rental sites, and they're going to compare it to our database, and we are going to be supplied with a list of violators. Are you directing us to ignore that?
We're not directing you to hire host compliance yet.
But we just need to be careful of second and third order effects. That's all I'm saying, sir.
Understood.
We do make different rules for Prudence Island. We let them drive golf carts over there on public roads.
But that's codified in state law.
But we do things.
I understood. Yes, we do. It is different.
Prudence Island resident there, let you know that. It's a little different.
And we love our Prudence Island residents. I'm just weary if there are going to be homeowners that are going to, or property owners are going to make that's one of those legal paths that will end up going down and end up in court. That's just my belief.
If I could just, two cents. I think we just have to, the ordinance applies to the properties. I mean, yes, there's a lot of people that have owned their properties for a long time, but there comes a time when properties get sold and not everybody's, the neighbor anymore. So, I mean, the ordinance is here to protect everybody, whether you're, an owner or not, or a renter or not. I mean, we have to look at it from that perspective. I spent a number of years on the zoning board where we grant variances under hardships, and then 6 months later, that house would be sold. So, I think, like, variances, they go with the property, the ordinances, they just cover the property, doesn't matter if you've owned the house for a year or 10 years or 30 years. It's just, we just have to come up with a base to move forward from, and that's what we're trying to do. So I'd avoid trying to treat Prudence different. I think we just have to put the ordinance out there and let it cover everybody that's within the town.
So at this point, we've made changes to the ordinance. The 9-month question still hangs out there. And I think right now, it would be better to pass and put it into effect, and we can make changes as things go. I don't feel comfortable putting the 9 months in there now. I would rather see that as an amendment in the future. I would like to see, it's difficult for our police department. They are stretched thin as it is to get to all these quote-unquote party houses, but I know they do their best job to get there and get to everywhere they can. But not advertising this as a long-term rental ordinance, which is what 9 months is, would be unfair to people who specifically are renting for 9 months. But we have changes we've made tonight. It is the council's pleasure to either pass it tonight, have the changes made, and pass it on the 23rd. Mr. Rayner?
It was brought up, and again, it's your purview, but Section 8B, I don't know if you further discussed it, taking out the +1 additional parking spot. Is that something that merits more discussion, or do we keep it in?
Or take out the whole thing.
Or take out the whole thing?
I have a 3-bedroom house that I can park 10 cars in.
I don't park my cars inside my house.
Yeah, well,
I'm sorry.
But, I mean, this is unfortunately for a couple, it's Highland Park, essentially. Common Fence Point, it's not quite as bad. There's a couple of roads in the backside of Common Fence Point that get tight, but this is an Island Park issue.
Yeah.
I mean,
We readily admit, we were trying to take care of those tight neighborhoods.
I mean, if you got a three-bedroom house, and you've got to provide 3 parking spaces, and you can only have 6 people in there, presumably they're couples and they're coming together. Even if they're not, they could have 3 cars. And if they don't have the spaces for them, they got to find some place on the street. I'm fine with taking the +1 out. Okay.
So then I'll make a motion under 8B to delete the phrase, the +1 additional parking space from that first sentence.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I'm just worried that one of the major concerns that we had was over parking, and that if we are weakening this ordinance to allow that parking problem not to be addressed, clearly that's a problem. So I would not support that motion.
Okay. All those in favor of removing the +1? Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-2.
Mr. President, if I could just go back to the 9-month issue. I believe we should pass this ordinance the way it is. And my experience with the Roger Williams renters are, when those kids go home in May, this summer rentals are going to move in. So it would behoove those people to spend the $100 and get their house inspected as is, because once they rent it for a week after the 9-month period, they're in violation. So I don't think that that's going to affect us on this ordinance tonight. The one concern I have, the gentleman has left us now, is what do we do about the one-night rentals? We haven't addressed that. And I agree with him on Atlantic Street that those are the properties that are going to be prone to the parties. And we haven't addressed that. So I don't know, maybe our solicitor could tell us we can't dictate that. I don't know what the answer is. But we're missing that piece of the puzzle, in my opinion.
Oh, I think some of those pieces, if that house is specifically listed as a 2-bedroom septic with 4 bedrooms being listed, that's going to solve the problem real quick just with this ordinance. Having the inspections done, we're going to solve a lot of the issues.
You're still going to have people coming for one night, you know. And people can join them until, what, 10 o'clock at night?
10 o'clock.
They can all go home. That's still a nuisance in the neighborhood, in my mind. Any suggestions on how to handle that? I mean,
There's no way to guarantee someone's going to say that there's not a rational basis, that there is a rational basis to say that if you're there one night, you're going to have more parties and create more disturbances than if you're there 3 nights. And again, anyway, property owners can assert rights and can make arguments against the municipality. I can't guarantee that would never happen. But,
so the ordinances that were looked at, nobody has addressed that, per se, that you're aware of?
I don't recall off the top of my head. I know that the weight of the court case law is that the duration of a rent, if it's 30 days residential use or 1-day residential use, it's still residential use, not a commercial use. So to draw a distinction between 1 and 3 days, it could be an issue.
The hard part is, where do you do it? Where do you draw the line?
Right.
If it's 2 days, or is it 3 days, is it a week? I think we need to police the one-night renters better. And the one-night renters are covered in most of our other ordinances as well. So I find it hard to believe that somebody's coming down to Portsmouth, renting a house just to have a party. They're most likely going to Newport and then coming back. And there are other ordinances that are in there to do that.
Okay.
We could be proven wrong and come back and change this in 6 months. But
You got to start somewhere.
Right.
This is a big start.
Ms. Pedro?
I think there's a typo in here, too.
Yeah, there's or versus of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Linda pointed that out.
Got that? So we're going to fix that or versus of?
Yep, already.
So the only thing left to do is either to A, adjourn and not do anything, or B, pass the ordinance that would become effective December 31st, 2018, with the structure underneath, violations wouldn't be penalized until December 31st, unless they're egregious, under other ordinances, right? But anybody who has a rental would have to be registered by December 31st, 2018. If they're going to be listed.
Mr. President, I would make a motion that we approve the ordinance for short-term rental of residential dwellings as presented and amended tonight.
Perfect. Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed?
I'm with you.
I don't know, I would rather have seen more discussion on this with I don't know. I think there's going to be unintended consequences for this.
Oh, there are.
So that's a 6-1? Or 7-0?
I'll pass it as is, but I think there's going to be unintended consequences.
Okay.
Install them together or show us surely all separately.
There's always hope.
That's encouraging, Mark. Thank you. Okay. 7-0. I believe it was a reluctant 7-0, but
Yeah,
it was a 7-0. Only left, we have correspondence. We have an invitation to the police parade on the May 6th. We have status and expected roles and responsibilities for Prudence Island Public Safety Officer, and resolution supporting the bond that we didn't support, or the resolution that we didn't support last time, and asking for, is this Portsmouth Water and Fire District, or is this us? I mean, isn't,
Portsmouth Water and Fire District,
they won't let us go under the road to put a
No.
faucet across the street?
we asked them last year, this came up last year.
All right, well,
They said no.
there's a new regime. Let's ask again.
All right.
Do I have a motion to receive and place these on file?
So moved.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, wait a minute. Did you want to pull one of those out?
Well, somebody was asking for action.
Yeah,
The
one from
resolution for
Prudence.
support.
Prudence Island.
Yeah, well,
Oh, I thought it was, I'm sorry.
Roger Williams.
That's right.
I think so.
Oh, never mind. It's okay.
All good?
Yeah.
Okay. All those, there was a second? Did somebody second Dave's motion to receive and place on file?
I'll do it.
Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Future meetings, our next one up is the 23rd. We will be having a regular scheduled council meeting. 24th, 5th, and 6th will be budget discussions. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Take your choice. Got it.